here's something we hope you'll really like.
It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We have completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan.
We're traveling through a dimension both of sound and ideas. We're at a place where the mind can comprehend and devise a wireless transmitter, measure time and light. Astonishing? Perhaps. But you can find it in a place that's known as...
Planet Green Trees! Attention, ladies and gentlemen. The Planet Green Trees show is underway with your host, attorney Michael Komorn.
You gotta have the haircut just like... Don't I know? Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
All righty.
We have launched.
Welcome, everybody. We are live and broadcasting here on Facebook and on YouTube. And I want to welcome everybody to Planet Green Trees episode number 461. We've officially named the show Trying to Make a Dovetail Joint. Someone could try to pick that reference out. It's been kind of a Beatles week, I would say.
You playing?
Trying to make a dovetail joint. And I'm Michael Komorn, your host of Komorn Law. Thank you for joining us. We have got an exciting show for you, very organized today, where you plan on staying on track and having segments and listening to our production staff that exists somewhere. And I want to go through that and start by introducing our community entertainment. And let me start by pointing out our people. There's no introduction for them. They're in a studio in the bunker, and they can't speak, but they can hear us. And I want to say hello to Justin and Tommy Two-Tone over in the bunker.
Tommy.
Well, thanks for putting it together, guys. And as we move around the room here, I want to introduce to you the one and only Jim Powers, is the co-founder of Michigan Parents for Compassion, former MI Legalized board member, advocate, parent, husband, and generally an awesome guy. Thanks for being here, Jim Powers.
Jimmy the Pepper.
Thank you, Michael.
Jimmy
Thank you,
P.
Steve. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here with everybody. Hope to get back into the studio soon, but for now, this is it's great that we still get to do this. And as always, fuck Bill Schuette.
Jim is confident that May 1st is going to be our return date.
Is he? You pretty confident of that, Jim?
I think confident is a pretty strong word, Michael.
That's fair.
Very.
We will probably end up reconvening to this conversation. We had a great show last week regarding the coronavirus. It was civilized. It was a discussion not about cannabis. Conversation evolved and every voice was heard. We may end up doing that again. Moving around the room, I want to introduce to you Deborah Young, who is an activist, citizen initiation specialist, which is also known as a ballot initiative specialist. If you want to get that done, call me and I can connect you with her.
Mm-hmm.
She's a former board director of and treasurer of MI Legalized. She's a caregiver and rock and roll survivor. She wants you to know this. When you smoke the herb, it reveals you to yourself. Please welcome Bob Marley. Deborah Young.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to see everybody to our new normal. And I think we're going to have a great show. And I also agree, fuck Bill Schuette, as always.
All right. That's fair. That's fair. We're on Zoom, so no one's paying attention. Next, we have Amanda Jocelyn, who, as we were going through our new reorganization, I see Jeff Frazier. He doesn't know what's going on, but we're going to get him in here. But Amanda Jocelyn, when we were convening our meeting this week and trying to be reorganized, she's the only one that fully responded appropriately to the questions that were asked.
I did.
Can't thank her enough. She gets an A+. She's if you don't know her by now, she is parent of 2 from the Ypsilanti area. She's been in the cannabis industry for more than 10 years, and she's a fantastic project manager, and she's the type of girl that will listen to gangster rap on her way to the farmer's market. She loves Snoop Dogg, Tupac, and the classic 90s. We may have a show on why 90s music is questionable in terms of good or bad. Obviously, we know position Amanda will take. And she reads and watches movies, and she's one of our guests tonight. She's going to be funny and add to our conversations. Thank you for being here, Amanda Jocelyn.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the show.
Excellent. Moving around the room, we have retired police officer Steve Miller, who has been tasked with a new segment for tonight's show. It's exciting. We'll talk about that when I tease the topics in a minute. But Steve Miller, as many of you know, is a retired police officer. He's been involved with the law enforcement to reform the drug war. His favorite movie is Rocky 1. His favorite band is Tantric. And he wished he would have spent the better part of his teen years in the 60s. He is a superior employee at Komorn Law. He's really in charge over there. To say he's an employee would be unjust. He's my dear friend. Please welcome Steve Miller.
Hello, everybody.
Yay, Steve.
I'm very excited about my new segment. I won't say what it is because I'll let you tease it, but I'm very excited and nervous at the same time. I've always wanted to do it.
All right. Well, so don't be nervous, and everybody loves you, and you're going to do great. So don't worry about it.
All right.
We have, moving around the room, a late add-on, and only because we spent so much time in the pre-planning and discussion of how things were going to go, and then I get the 7:45 text from him, hey, you mind if I get back on the show today? Of course not, because we all know him as Colin McDougall, but most people know him as C Money Murder. C Murder.
Yeah, there he is.
He's an activist, crime fighter, and will work for Cannabis.
Yes.
Colin McDougall is here.
Thanks for coming up with a bio, Michael, on such short notice.
My pleasure. And I may switch. I have a special background that is exclusively for you. I've been waiting for you to be back on the show so you can see it and comment on it. It might deal with psychedelics, maybe.
Cool.
We'll get to that later.
Cool.
Moving around the Zoom screen, we have our, I didn't get the bio, but everybody knows him as Rick Thompson. He's the originator of the Cannabis Chronicles, his Michigan Cannabis Development Industry, Michigan Cannabis Development
Business.
He's a developing cannabis dude.
He used to be fantastic as the news exclusively the news on Planet Green Trees and the old blog talk. Now he shows up and has his commentary, Free Willy, no preparation. We understand he's a little bit of a headache tonight. We are wishing him health and peace as he interacts with us tonight. Please welcome, also known as Big Daddy, the one and only Rick Thompson.
Thank you very much. If there's a special background for Colin McDougall, it's got to be a blood splatter, right? See murder? That's the only way to go.
That's fair.
I think it's a mushroom one, though. So I'll give
Also good.
I'm actually going to switch my background right now just because you're talking about it, just so we can get through this. But it's you'll see what I'm talking about when we get there, or maybe not. Maybe I can't find it now. Moving around the room, I want to introduce another one of our participants here who was at the meeting, has been helping to organize things. He is what we like to call responsible for everything. He's worked in cannabis law reform for well over a decade. He was a co-founder of the first dispensary in Michigan and the co-author of MRTMA, and is a practicing guitar player and also banjo. Please welcome Jamie Lowell.
Yep, I got it. No, that was good. First of all, a tenor banjo specifically, which I never really play. I just own one.
What about a ukulele?
And a ukulele quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm a fan.
All true, plus a bunch of other stuff that's too lengthy to list.
Also bass.
I appreciate it.
Right?
Yeah, sure. Everything.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Nothing well, but everything.
Who said bass? Who said bass?
I did.
So I have my Colin McDougall background, and just so you know, just so we can
the peyote.
Right, there you go. So I see him in the corner here. I'm so glad to have him on and have him joining us. He's wearing a hat tonight. It's my dear friend Jeff Frazier from Texas originally, but he's a world traveler, internationally renowned lawyer, and freedom fighter. He's kind of like a Laszlo in my life. Like, you don't really know if he's there or not. He may be a figment of my imagination. He's also a seasoned guitar player and has played guitar all over the world. Most specifically in the Galapagos Islands, where he has confirmed that there are turtles there with two penises. Please welcome Jeff Frazier.
I swear it to be true. How are you, brother?
Would that be a blessing?
Awesome to be with you.
Natural selection. Yeah.
Would that be a blessing or a curse, do you think?
I don't know.
It's still live.
How many girls are around?
Depends on how many hands you have.
What do you think, Jamie? Blessing or curse?
Hands.
2 penises. Come on, quick.
Hey, it came out. It was part of natural selection. If it works for something, that's why it's there. So
I'm just
that's
asking.
the beauty of the Galapagos. 2 penises, and now is the trend is starting there. It'll be the norm in a few hundred years for all males.
That should be the show title.
Already
2
growing his
penises.
second one now.
Double input. Yep.
That's fair. That's fair. So let's do this. We actually got through that kind of as anticipated. I will check the clock later. But as we said, I want to go through the topics here. If there's room for me to rant, we will. And
tease the topics.
Tease the topics, and then maybe a quick rant and break is the plan. Then we'll come back and get on into it, right? Is that the plan? Jim, you're in charge. All right.
Yeah, sure.
So we got, here are the topics. Topic number 1. Association of State Marijuana Legalization Policies for Medical and Recreational Use with Vaping-Associated Lung Disease. In other words, what is the status of vaping in Michigan? Can anyone tell me? It was a recipe for lung disease and things blowing up in people's faces.
Yeah.
We've gotten past that. What is the status? We're going to discuss this. Number 2, Judge Marlinga in Macomb County invalidates a medical marijuana dispensary license in Warren.
Boom.
I think the word nefarious local activity is a fair way to describe it. We'll get more about that.
We'll talk all about that.
Our
our
special new topic, as discussed earlier, and with no pressure or without any intention of increasing the perceived nerves, Steve Miller will be doing a movie review. 2 movies he'll be reviewing include 1917 and some Van Diesel movie. But
Bloodshot.
Bloodshot.
I love Vin Diesel.
All right. Okay. And then, of course, in the topic of the coronavirus, AG Nessel stops iconic Detroit apartment building from evicting 80 tenants, mainly elderly, during the COVID crisis. This is an interesting dynamic about business and the interactions of government and functioning. Opens ourselves up to a lot of different discussion there. And then topic 5, because we didn't get enough last week, another Lansing protest occurred, and it happened, if I'm not mistaken, in front of the governor's mansion today. In front of her mansion, moving on to her actual private property and meandering around there. Probably causing some concerns, but we'll discuss that and get some of the commentary about that. Those are the topics. Did I hit them all?
I think
so. Okay. I guess.
Except for the discussion about like Jim's idea.
Oh yeah. And please, yes, exactly. And I don't know why. Okay, but so the other and it's as significant. We are introducing this musical topic. It's right at the top, right?
Right.
The question that we're going to be addressing.
Very polarizing topic. Apparently, it's
very polarizing.
Where's Dan at? We need Dan. Dirty Dan.
We're going around the room. Is that what we're doing?
I tried to make him call in.
Dirty Dan.
I tried to get him to call in, but he said no.
Somebody's going to have to be his proxy. Who's going to be Dan's proxy?
I will.
Okay.
I'll be Dan's proxy.
Wait, I don't know. No.
Colin is an outside third party. I think we.
Okay, Colin can be Dan's proxy. You be Dirty Dan's proxy.
That's a good idea.
What conversation? In what conversation?
We're discussing whether what
Monster is R.E.M's best
conversation
album.
is why. In the catalog of R.E.M. music, Jim is going to advocate that Monster is the best album. And he's going to have to defend that.
You? I thought you were taking that view.
I'm taking this opinion. And here's the disclaimer. The opinions or comments expressed or heard during this podcast do not represent the opinions or thoughts of Komorn Law PLC or Michael Komorn personally. The opinions or comments expressed here on the podcast are more likely the thoughts and comments of a person engaging in the effort to entertain. For this particular podcast, it's likely that the opinions herein are and will be made with the specific purpose of trying to remain neutral and objective for the specific intention of expanding the discourse of the conversation and to play specifically devil's advocate for everyone listening's pleasure. Okay, that's my disclaimer. So, Deb, if I take a position, you can't hold it against me tomorrow.
I'm not going to hold it against you. Okay.
I'm just saying. What about my
peyote? For the ones in the back.
What about my
peyote? I'm going to line myself opposite of Jim. I'm putting myself on the other side of Jim because I have a different opinion on this question.
That's fine. But please be ready to defend it. We may need to go deep. We got to like some deep cuts on the album that you say is better.
I'm totally ready to defend.
Okay.
Deep. We're going to dive deep. Deep dive.
Very good. I'm glad we got that going on. So, before we get into the topics, so everyone's going to get a chance to talk. I think as a group, we got a lot of interesting comments and input here.
No, there is some interesting input now.
All right.
Well, we're going to find out about that right now. It's all going to go to the wall right now. So let's
get back from the break, Michael.
Okay, one second.
We got to go to a break.
All right, we can go to.
We're going to a break. Tommy, can we go to a break? Perfect. We're going to a break.
the Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today, michiganmedicalmarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. michiganmedicalmarijuana.org.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
All righty, we're back. Thanks for staying with us. This is Planet Green Trees, episode number 461. We're calling it Trying to Make a Dovetail Joint. And we have our Zoom guests here, and we're going about to dive into the topics here. Our first one is the Association of State Marijuana Legalization Policies for Medical and Recreational Use with Vaping-Associated Lung Disease. Not too long ago, many of us remember a serious scare across the country, and another potential could have been a medical disaster, right? We have thousands upon thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more than that, who are vaporizing using, instead of smoke and combustible material, something that's creating a vapor by heating it up, a liquid, a vapor. And of course, this is also part of the method of ingestion used for cannabis as well. But it was in particular these specific flavored nicotine that was being used, and even in some circles marketed as a healthier choice than cigarettes, right? That's the concept, and many people have bought into that. I even have a friend from high school that lives in Florida and opened one of these things up, and that's his entire pitch, which is vape instead of smoke. It's healthier for you. But and of course, if you want to talk about a pandemic, I think it is flourishing, this habit amongst our teenagers and that era as well. If I'm not, I have no data to back this up, but that's my impression. And of course, our governor took the position with her executive order authority to just completely ban them. Am I right? Is that what happened? She picked a certain number of them, certain flavors, and said, these are off the shelf. So I say all that because within a short period of time, this fear and concern was over. We clearly have other medical health issues that we're dealing with. But I asked the question, since this was such a huge ordeal, I'm sure we had 2 or 3 shows, and I'm sure Jazz Cabbage Cafe and Medical Monday, all those shows that talk about cannabis, were addressing this issue. And this article that we're referring to, which is out of the Journal of American Medicine of 2020, the April 6, 2020, discusses in specific the over 2,500 cases of electronic cigarette, e-cigarette, or vaping lung injuries that were reported to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. The specific cause of this is unknown, but most patients report using e-cigarettes to consume THC, and CDC otherwise have hypothesized that the black market THC products may have also caused this issue. So that's what this paper, and we can discuss what its ultimate conclusions are, but let's go around the room and hear everyone's thoughts and comments on this. Rick, I know you covered this in a lot of your reporting, as you do, and keeping everyone informed on this. And I believe, for a period of time, we were joking that somebody could not be pulled over for smoking like probable cause didn't exist for the smell of marijuana anymore, but somebody smoking a e-cigarette because it was contraband would be probable cause. In the craziest fucking period of time, there was, So I don't know. What is your take on it? What in terms of what you interacting with the businesses and consumers? What is your thoughts on the cart market for cannabis right now?
Well, there's an important parallel to draw to. Remember that we had the spice and K2 epidemic here in the United States of America, where that was popping up on shelves. It was demonstrably causing harm and killing people. Our legislature, not our governor, our legislature took action. First individual communities did, then the legislature did, and together they were able to ban it. Governor Whitmer took a more direct approach to it. And because she was more direct, it's caused a lot of controversy for her methodology. I think the goal was admirable, to take products off the shelf that were questionably perhaps not healthy. We do the same thing with vegetables. When we have listeria in lettuce, we pull whole batches of lettuce and destroy things just on the maybe that it might make people sick. So there's precedent for it, but the methodology was what really caused the concern. I think the industry has bounced back pretty well. I think you're right, though, Michael, that certain flavors were removed from the shelf and probably won't come back. Those flavors were looked at as child friendly, I believe, was the justification for that.
Sure.
But as far as the cannabis industry goes, vape cartridges, and Jamie is a much better source than us and myself, but vape cartridges accounted for 25 to 35% of total volume sales in some cannabis industries prior to the ban. I'm not sure where that percentage is now.
So Jamie, I want to hear your opinions, but I'm just reminded of when it was one of your, I don't know, couple of your seminars that you had that Andrew Brisboe spoke at. I caught him at the Starbucks for a second. Rick's leaving. I'm talking. So I caught him at the Starbucks, and he was discussing how he was on a call with other industry, licensees, and he was advising everybody to buy carts. That's where it's at. Like, hey, buy cartridges. This is where your supply should be. And of course, this thing happened. So all that purchase, and all that inventory that people were having was withdrawn or taken off the market, and there's a shortage for flour. It was just a bizarre time, flipping back and forth. But Jamie, what are your thoughts from your industry's perspective, and what can you educate us on, if anything?
Well, they are really popular. I mean, this last round of controversy and pulling them from the shelves and having to have them retested and replaced and all that kind of stuff caused a little bit of setback in that market, but they do remain popular. We were talking about a couple different things at once. The other nicotine kind of vape market too. That really has helped people not smoke, and probably has been better for a lot of people in some ways. And I agree with Rick. The concept of the intent of the governor to try to create more safety for people was there, but just creating a prohibition on something that's otherwise attainable from online or out of state, or people bought bulk amounts of it as it was nearing the time when they were going to be banned and stuff like that. It just didn't address the issue appropriately. I mean, the intent was good, but not a great execution of that issue. I agree with. But I didn't read the study that we're talking about, but the vitamin E thing turned out to be the main culprit, and that was why everything was pulled from the shelf and had to be tested to see what was in it and what could return and what couldn't, and that type of stuff.
Deborah, to come to you and get your thoughts, because but just to answer Jamie's question, the discussion in this article in conclusion states that the data suggests that these cases were concentrated in states where consumers do not have legal access to recreational marijuana dispensaries. This could be just a business article written in a medical magazine to promote regulated industry. The association was not driven by state level differences in e-cigarette use, and the case rates were not associated with state-level prevalence of e-cigarette use. One possible inference from our results is that the presence of legal markets for marijuana help mitigate or may be protective against this. Generally speaking, it says here, the reasons for this association is not clear. So this is not a finding that's substantiated by a cause. There's an association that they're representing and just drawing parallels. I don't even think that this end game conclusion gives us any answers. But I think whatever that panic was, it's somehow subsided. I mean, you can buy cartridges at dispensaries. I don't know that the number of calls on the CDC for these particular lung issues is continued. And we've all seen a couple of stories here there of individuals that were severely impacted by it. But Deborah, what are your thoughts on this? I know you're.
Well, I mean, it even ties into the pandemic, because I saw a doctor on CNN yesterday who was claiming that patients who had been vaping and using and tying the whole thing into that they were more at risk for their lungs developing pneumonia, which is what this virus leads to, and suggesting that people who were not disclosing their vaping uses while they were being hospitalized and putting on ventilators were at greater risk of dying because somehow their lungs had been damaged by the vaping. So I don't think it's gone away. I think that the pandemic has just taken over everything. So you're just not hearing it anymore. I know that my own patients are not vaping anymore. People just stopped vaping because they just weren't sure. And even after the state assured us that they've tested this stuff is still coming up dirty in dispensaries. So, I'm always trying to err on the side of health, and I don't want to endanger anybody's health. So I just don't recommend them. I know people like them, but I just don't recommend them. I don't use them myself anymore.
I stopped as well. And I don't
I'm a little leery of them, and I was never really anybody that used them a lot for my own self, but I think that the vitamin E thing is definitely something that affected a lot of these carts, and with the testing, being available now for vitamin E, what I've been seeing is that the Laura bulletins that come out are for a couple of months ago, notifying people of any issues if they purchased a product like 2 months ago. Well, I know from my usage as a patient, it's probably gone within a week or two. I mean, if it lasts through the weekend, I don't know.
Right.
So it avoids the whole point, I think, of, regulation.
What does Colin have to say as a bud tender, or as I don't know if he still is, but as a person involved
in furlough?
Right, but as a previous bud tender, leading up to the furlough, and in your essential business that you were operating in, which doesn't make any sense that you're on furlough, you think it'd be needed.
Colin, what's up with that?
What is the?
I don't want to catch the virus.
It's a voluntary
you
furlough.
chose to stay home. Okay.
Yeah.
Self furlough.
I work my other job from home, so I and it's kind of become more of like a full-time job because I'm the one answering the phone and doing all the emails. So
that kind of tarnishes C. Murder a little bit, though. That you're voluntarily staying away.
Did I introduce him as an activist and a fighter? It sounds like he's not.
Crime fighter.
Crime fighter,
Crime fighter. Yeah, I like that.
Paper pusher.
But
he solved all the problems at Bloom, and now he's moving on.
Back to tearing me up. Let's get away from the part and go back to that question. I thought people kind of by like January or February bounced back to their normal consumption of the cart.
You think for real?
Yeah,
Wow.
There was more of a demand for them, and once they were on the shelf, they'd sell out really quickly because there wasn't as many brands out anymore, or just the testing, and it just seemed like when people would come in, they'd buy 4 of them at a time or whatever. But I don't use vape cartridges really. I mean, I have in the past, but I just like how flower tastes.
Okay.
But I do have my Puffco, so I mean, I have been using that, and hopefully that doesn't screw my lungs up. But I mostly do flower. So.
Okay. Jeff Frazier, I see John Schlicker's on. Ever give a big wave to John Schlicker, the Cannapalooza 2020 is happening this year.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
You and everything. Awesome.
Is Jeff Frazier still there? Jeff Frazier?
Yeah, Jeff's still there.
Okay. Jeff, I think, is a reformed cigarette smoker. He can maybe give some insight as to his desire to puff on a vaporizer, what impact it may have. We've all kind of represent. First of all, I want to say this. I think everyone can understand the draw and attraction of the vape pen, right? It does not smell.
Yes.
It's easier to handle. It lasts. You have to, less carrying around. You put one thing in your pocket, right? I mean, I don't know. Add to that, whoever may. I don't know if the impact of it when you have a good one has the same medicinal impact that the flower. And I certainly don't know if it reveals to you who you are, as Deb and Bob Marley would say. But the question is, Jeff Frazier, what are your thoughts on the vape pen? What do you say?
A couple of things. One, I think that you make a good point when you say that, you know, it was about the vitamin E acetate, you know. I'm reminded about what happened after 9/11. It took them years after 9/11 and the whole Patriot Act and the invasion of Iraq and everything else to actually do the one thing that would have prevented 9/11, which is to fortify the cabin doors so that they couldn't get in. And I think that when this whole vaping crisis came out, you know, it became relatively clear, relatively early, that the problem was the vitamin E acid. Nonetheless, you had some people at the CDC and people that wanted it to be that it was the THC in the vapes that was causing the problem. And it wasn't, number one. So the vitamin E acetate, I think getting that out and testing for that has taken care of a lot of the problems. With regards to vaping generally, including vaping of nicotine, here's an interesting thing that they're beginning to find, and this is not a scientific opinion. But they have for years tried to show that the smoke from smoking marijuana causes lung disease and cancers. And I've been unable to find a study that shows that to be true. There are a good number of studies that show that, in fact, the lung damage from cigarettes, from tobacco, is the nicotine itself, because nicotine destroys vitamin A, and vitamin A is fundamental to lung health. So there's two reasons not to vape. I prefer and recommend that people smoke marijuana as opposed to vaping it. And for that matter, I probably recommend that people who smoke tobacco, what I'm saying is if you're vaping nicotine, you're doing damage to your lungs. It's not the smoke necessarily that's the problem. It's the nicotine that causes nicotine.
Still, I am a recovering vapist.
Steve, you are?
Yes.
Did you prefer?
Yeah.
Is that the preferred
Michael is too.
Is vapist?
Yes, vapist. When you used to vape, I was a vapist.
A vaporer.
No, not a vapist.
But vapist.
A vapagander.
Jamie, are you a vapist?
No, I've actually tried it quite a bit, believe it or not, but I've never really liked vaping. I don't really get that high from it, you know, so.
The first time that you took me hostage and forced me to use cannabis against my will was with a vape pen at the Rooster Tail, Jamie, if you don't remember.
Well,
all right, we're getting a call for the break. We got a lot of other topics to get to. Of course, upcoming will be the in-depth discussion of why Jim says Monster is R.E.M's best album. And of course, Steve Miller will be doing a music review. Maybe we can get Jeff Frazier, get his guitar out. Maybe. And I understand John Schlicker will be doing some tap dancing. So we got a lot in store here. Episode 461. And we are monitoring comments on Facebook.
Are we?
And we will try to answer if anyone has any questions or wants to add anything to the discussion.
All right, good.
And we're going to take a quick break, if I understand things, from the bunker, and we will be right back. You're listening to episode 461, Planet Green Trees. We'll be right back.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Don't get busted without a good attorney. Check out the new show, Kicking It with Komorn, with your new hosts, Earl and Michael Komorn. Hi, I'm Earl Carruthers. I have been a client of Michael Komorn's, and if you are with an attorney that you don't feel comfortable with, I do want to let you know that there are good attorneys out there. I personally went through quite a few different attorneys before I came Komorn. I could save you some time and some pain. Komorn is truly a loving and kind-hearted attorney and passionate about the law. And he won't just make you take a plea. He will definitely see all the options and let you make a good choice from there. But if you do need a new attorney, or if you're looking for a good attorney to start off with, check out Komorn.
It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We have completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan, and nationally, and internationally, and even in Spaceland. There's an argument that we evolved from the cannabis plant. Let's just be honest, okay?
Ow, what's going on, everybody? How y'all doing?
420th episode.
If you're a connoisseur, you're going to want the good stuff. And if you want the good stuff, you're going to go for the mom and pop stuff because that's the good stuff.
It's just a real pleasure to come here and congratulate you on your 420th show, and thank you for having me on a few times over the 420.
The system is built to herd you into pleas of guilty. There's a herding mentality. Follow the leader over there, jump into the river, try to swim across and not get eaten by the alligators. It happens every day in courts across the state of Michigan. There are ways to avoid this. There are issues that can be identified. There's motions that can be filed, evidentiary hearings that could be had, and ways to fight back and push back. Don't get herded into the Mirror River. Don't get eaten by an alligator. Don't get herded. Call me before you plea. Attorney Michael Komorn.
And now back to more Planet Green Trees.
Iron Hall.
All right, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. And you're listening to Planet Green Trees. And I'm Michael Komorn, your host. Everyone adjust their virtual background because it's that time of the show to do that. John, does that look familiar? You recognize that from anywhere? Maybe you can't see it, but...
yeah, that looks good, Michael.
I did not draw it, but somebody you know did. And I took it from her Facebook page. But
awesome.
Who did that, Nikki?
That's right. She claims to be an amateur. Look at that. That's some pro stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't tell her how much I like it.
You stole her artwork, Michael?
She put it into the public domain. It's now my backdrop. What do you mean?
Dude, you got to at least name her then. You've got to tell us who the artist is.
I am right now, and I'm saying this at the time that I want. I'm gonna. What do you call it? What do you when you get an art? You get someone to paint something for you. What is that? Like a commission. I'm gonna commission her to do a portrait of Jeff Frazier for my office. That's what I'm trying to have.
Beautiful.
Anyways, on break, for those that are listening at home, we couldn't stop talking about the COVID protesters. For some reason, that's our favorite topic. We're all drawn to it. We discussed it a lot last week. And what do you know, today, there's a news story that is one of our topics, number 4 or 5. We find that there's protests outside Michigan governor's mansion today. And maybe the same people from last time, but it's certainly an ongoing phenomenon now. And despite the stay home, stay safe order, people were gathering at the house. They were not, I don't think they were honoring the social distancing issue. I didn't see a lot of people with masks, and I certainly didn't, I saw a lot of people with guns. Nick Somberg, co-organizer of the protest and an attorney, maybe bringing bad name to attorneys in the practice. But again, I'm a big proponent of those that have the right to protest, said the executive orders are unconstitutional. We can discuss that further. And he urged other protesters to push back constantly because if they didn't, the government would take more rights and freedoms away, he said. And you know, we all have our hot points that would drive us into a protest. We've maybe in our history have protested something that we feel passionate about, such as cannabis. Nobody in our group here was getting in line here to drive down the street of the governor's, the caravan of protesters in the governor's mansion, Lansing. Jeff Frazier, let me come back to you because you're in Texas, and I believe some of the opinions, I don't know. I mean, probably. Yeah, I feel like there's each of the states is dealing with it differently. I think there's regional and different environments that people are living. Like for example, Jeff's is in a much more rural area where he's right now, I think, or his family is, and it's not like the same population of people that are gathered. In fact, there are people that live in socially distanced every day. Kind of quarantined from everybody else, other than the essential things that they need to come and go. But Jeff, you weren't on the show last week because you didn't call in, and we blame you for that. But add your points here and why people are protesting, and if you were to make the best case for why this is okay, and we shouldn't be deeply concerned about these people in honoring the right to protest. If you're still there.
Jeff's on mute, unfortunately. We need to get Jeff back off of mute.
While we're waiting for Jeff, I would like to know where the hell the protection detail was.
Oh, don't worry.
Look, I'm sure they were told to stand down. What you want to do is get this over and done with quickly. If you have a confrontation with those protesters, it blows up. And then Trump talks about it and everything else too. Just let it go. It's an hour of inconvenience and then it's over.
True.
Yeah.
Plus, closing the office.
I just want to interject, Michael, because I don't think this is about protesting, and protesting is reasonable. It's the form of protest at this time that is the real issue.
There you go.
There was very recently a huge protest in Israel against Netanyahu, and they all had masks and they all stayed 2 meters apart in this huge giant square. Right. It's one thing to protest. It's another thing to go out and spread disease,
and endanger people's lives. And another reason, like Rick said, the officers nobody's going to interfere you. Then you're going to endanger law enforcement. You got them out there grabbing these crazy people who are scratching and spitting and, with guns.
Even the people with masks and 6 feet apart left their homes and came out and did things unnecessarily.
They had to,
even though it wasn't as risky as these other people, it was still unnecessary. It still increased the risk of spreading the virus.
Yeah, and the arguments are so lame. I mean, I'm hearing people arguing about, and they have inaccurate facts. People can cut their grass if they want to. They can go outside and cut the lawn. You just can't call a lawn service over because you can't endanger somebody's employees to come and cut your grass. It's simple, and it's not that hard to do. We've all been doing it. I understand people are having economic issues, but these guys were not having economic. That's not what this was about. This was a whole Trump thing.
It was a Trump rally, man.
They were wearing,
which is a different philosophical question than what Jeff's going to answer. But it was a Trump rally ultimately.
It was a Trump rally.
It was. And the thing that was disappointing to me is people who for years have stocked up food and been survivalists and prepared for the worst case scenario. The preppers. I mean, these guys on the steps of the Capitol for the last 10 years have been saying, I can go off the grid for 10 years. And then after like 3 days, they have to go ahead.
3 days they're crying. Yeah, exactly. They're crying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's the form. I'm with Jamie because, the government can implement reasonable restrictions. They're subject when they infringe on free speech to strict scrutiny. In other words, are they narrowly tailored to an important state function? And I think that this probably qualifies. Somebody mentioned earlier that clearly in Michigan, the western suburbs, northern, part of the country hasn't been hammered as much as Detroit has been. And we've been talking with the government over in Louisiana, who is trying to craft some kind of response to prison. And And it needs to be narrowly tailored. People have a legitimate complaint when laws are arbitrary and capricious, and what is or is not essential is completely arbitrary and capricious. I think that Gretchen kind of did a few things that were misinterpreted, some of them that overreached, but I mean, it's certainly understandable that you should. But I've firmly come to the conclusion that the best thing that we could do for ourselves and others is to stay outside. The mortality rate in the 1918 pandemic fell from the high 40s into the low 20s, simply by taking sick people and moving them outside into tents, getting them into the sun, getting them into the fresh air. It reduces transmission. Outdoors is a good thing. So when you start telling Michigan, number one, they can't go outdoors. They can't, go on a boat.
You can go outdoors. You can go outdoors.
You can't go to Home Depot and get your power tools. I mean, shit, I'd hate to tell my wife that she couldn't have her power tools. So, I mean, I understand. I understand the.
I think you can go to Home Depot now.
You can go to Home Depot and you can go outside and you can walk your dog and you can go jogging and you can ride your bike. You just can't get in groups and do that. You can do it individually.
People are just like going there and just walking around all day.
Yeah, they're like sightseeing in the store. They walk into Walmart. It's like entertainment for the day because they're cooped up and they walk around for 4 hours. They don't want you to do that. They want you to go in, get your stuff, get out. Try and cut this off at the balls so we don't face it again in the winter. Because that's what they're saying is we could hit a rebound in the winter.
For purposes of parody and otherwise entertainment, let me suggest that you have to go to Costco. You have to go to Meijer's. Only the big commercial stores are open. Every other one is shut down. How's that?
Yeah.
How's that? What do you mean? Yeah.
It's changing the economy for real.
Plus today? Why are they open?
Who?
Pet Supplies Plus.
Well, because pets are essential. I mean, what are you going to let them?
I swear,
let your dog, let your dog starve, and
They just don't sell paint or something.
Well, there's some arbitrary.
Right, you can buy.
Those are for the big box stores. There's an Ace Hardware in Ferndale's open. I mean, they only let so many people in it at a time.
You can buy paint in there if you go in there. Because,
they are open. And garden supplies. It's small enough. It doesn't qualify for the.
They just don't want
they have a square footage.
criteria. 3,000 people packed in a store, all wandering around up and down the aisles, together.
So, how much traffic there was today? There was a lot of traffic when I went outside.
Are the parks open?
Yeah.
Well, some parks.
No, not all of them. Not all of them.
Some parks. The state park.
I drove by some.
Pontiac Lake Recreation area. I was at 3 different entrances. All of them were barred the other day.
Yeah, state parks are closed.
I drove by some playgrounds and they've got all the equipment roped off with caution tape, all wound through it. So the kids could, if they were out there, there's no way they could even utilize the equipment. All through Oak Park and Ferndale.
You can run through the parks. I don't know. They said
you can run and ride your bike, but they don't want you lingering. They don't want you sitting on benches. They don't want you, hanging out. They, just do your thing and go home.
In Ann Arbor at the ARB, there were some, I didn't go, but my Rob went and he said that he sent me pictures. There were people out there and they were just kind of lounging, around in the sun, just like put their blankets out and whatever. And but there weren't an overwhelming amount of people out. There were people.
Your point's well taken. If I go to the park and I'm not 10 feet away from somebody or I'm not breathing on each other, I mean, the chances of transmission seem to be pretty small. I mean, they look back and they use this idea that all of these people went to spring break to this particular beach and then took it all back home. It may be that there was some transmission by being on the beach, but more likely they got sick in the nightclubs and the bedrooms of spring break.
I don't know. I saw a doctor claiming it can be airborne, and so if you're outside, you actually need 13 feet instead of 6 because Yeah, especially if there's a wind moving, droplets get into a wind and they can disperse further than 6 feet. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I want to exercise on the side of caution, and I think that that's what the governor is doing, because in the end, the buck stops there, and anybody who dies, I'm sure, is going to be on her conscience. And if she can eliminate even one death, I think that's what she's thinking. And I'm sure she's thinking into the future too, because what is our economy going to look like in the future here? When things open back up, I think a lot of mom and pops are going to be done. I think a lot of things are going to be done. I think that the retail market's going to be totally different. I think a lot of stuff is going to be delivery. You're not going to see these stores anymore. Gone are the days, Amanda, where we go try on jeans and stuff. Girl, we're going to have to order them online all the time. I believe that. I think that's what's happening. The wave of the future is all these delivery drivers who are independent contractors, with no bunnies and stuff.
By the way, it's great. The higher death rate.
Sorry.
All right.
It was easy to tell who did that. It was easy to tell who did that. And by the way, breaking news, according to David Young, the metro parks are open. So don't question that.
Well,
okay.
All right. See?
Good.
Yeah, the metro parks are definitely open.
Those are state parks.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Regional.
Advantages. There's some studies out there from China that are just coming out, and there was only two or three out of a study of 3,000 cases. There were only one outbreak that was an outdoor outbreak. And if you look at Italy and you look at Spain and you look at New York City and you look at the places where this thing has gotten to be horrible, it's where they confine people indoors. So I'd get outside. I'm not talking about the economy or your free speech rights or whatever else, but open up your windows and open up your doors and let sunshine in. Go outside.
It is two completely different conversations. Like, if you want to get the economy back in order, it may, and that's the only goal. There's an answer. If you want to minimize the health liabilities, your approach may be completely different. Right? I mean, they're two completely different conversations. And if you don't think the virus is going to impact you, it's, then it's hard to tell someone to stay at home, And so, again, I'm just trying to, as I said, play some devil's advocate here. But here's something that might help our conversation a little bit. There's some law. I know not everyone likes to talk about the law here, but there was, in a time when there was, because we have, just to summarize, we've got people protesting, and part of the theory is we have a right to protest. We don't like this infringement on our rights. You're interfere with our right to assemble. This is martial law. What comes next? Now you're gonna have exit. Like Jim said, what's next? They're tracking your phones, where you're going, to see who you've been in and out and who you've been dealing with, so they can track the viruses. And by the way, there's a movement among scientists, we all should know, trying to guilt everybody into wearing masks. I could see a time in the future where it'll be a crime, misdemeanor, some kind of citation to go out in public without a mask. I wouldn't put this too far out there. The reason for the masks, is Colin laughing? Oh, no, okay.
I was coughing.
Okay,
but yet they were blocking Muslim women from putting a mask over their face. I mean, that's just, 10 months ago?
I know,
but
the thing about the masks makes a lot of sense, and the data supports it.
I know. Well, the point is, let's explain why the masks may work. It's because it doesn't protect you from someone else; it protects someone else from you.
That's right.
So when you go out in the world, walking or otherwise, you don't have the capability of spreading or coughing. In fact, when you see a surgeon in an emergency room, they're all covered and draped with stuff. That is so that not to get stuff on them, but their mask doesn't protect stuff from coming into them. It protects the wounds and the operating that they're doing from the doctor or the nurse from entering there. So that's the point that of all of that. You don't need a special mask. You need a mask. You could have a cloth, something easily made that doesn't, you're not breathing, spitting on people.
But Michael, let's face it though, there's a reason why the N95 masks are the preferred method, because not all cloths are created equal. There are ways that you can reduce droplet transmission. People that throw a bandana on there, it's good, but it's not the best way.
No, I understand that.
I'm just trying to make the point, those masks that we're talking about protect the person wearing the mask from getting it into their, breathing apparatus of their body, right? So, and I agree, your point being that a mask to that person may not prevent it from being out, but if everyone's wearing masks, it reduces the sneezing, breathing of germs in areas. I mean, that's all I'm saying. And, that's, as
Absolutely.
Jim was saying,
no question about it.
There's a movement among scientists that happens, but I don't know. It's a weird factor. But anyways,
if it's between that and not going out, I mean, I'll gladly wear a mask if that means we can go out.
It's probably a part of the new normal. I would think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really not that big a deal. I mean, I do it now when I go into stores and whatnot when I'm out and about, and there's certain places, like obviously at home, that it's not a big deal, but most places in public, you just throw it on, go do what you need to do, and get back in the car.
Everybody's doing it. Right?
I see people having their mask hanging from their rearview mirror as they're driving, so that when they get out of the car, they put it right on. It's easy to do.
Yeah, masks are...
It's a responsible community act, right? I mean, if you're really, and it may contribute to the ability to kind of get back to things, and see the data go down. But I just want to, so there was a court case that just came out on April 17th, and it addressed some of the issues. It was filed in the 14th Circuit Court, which apparently is Muskegon. And I have the decision that was made, but it seems to be a declaratory judgment, which is where you seek relief from the court to give an opinion about something. And we're talking about what the executive order and the limitations of what was essential businesses, and we have a ruling. So the court states here that they've received the briefing, heard oral arguments, has entered a written opinion in the case, and it follows as the parties have stipulated the defendant in this case, who is Nicholas Daniels and Landscape Supplies LLC. This is a landscape company that was the defendant. They were operating in the state of Michigan, brought a declaratory action to try to shut them down. So the defendant in this case, according to the court, is deemed essential during the COVID-19 state of emergency for purposes of operating a compost facility and has been designated as an authorized compost site. Accordingly, the following non-essential operations by defendant must cease. So this is the other things that this business does. So they're allowing them to stay open for purposes of their compost site, because that's deemed essentially. They were able to convince the judge. Maybe someone could explain that in some more details. It's familiar with composting.
It's for gardening. It's for gardening. So a vegetable garden, and you would use compost. So
very
good.
So
people need a place to put their yard waste. The compost area is an essential service, especially in springtime.
And people come and get it afterwards and use it.
They get it for their garden and use it to produce food. So.
And just for the listeners, we're talking about the things that were covered that were essential were in the frame of farming and fruits and things for farming and food and to that extent. What was not deemed essential was routine landscaping, tree service, irrigation, and other related outdoor maintenance operations. All deemed not essential, not allowed to do it. The state won on that. Delivery of materials to customers must cease. Curbside pickup materials from the defendant's location by customers, which is interesting because that would seem to suggest that if they couldn't do the curbside pickup regarding the composting, maybe, they would have to, they couldn't come pick it up. It seemed like they were requiring the person who wants to unload the compost rig, as you were saying, unload the materials.
I think they're referring to curbside pickup of other materials, because with composting, you can go right back into a composting area and get whatever you need. But it seems like perhaps the landscaping company would be flagstones and other things they may be selling.
Understood, but I think the curbside pickup materials from the defendant's locations by customers deemed non-essential. But it may be other things you're talking about. I understand. Right. So they declare this as narrow exception to this order permits delivery of materials and in-person work that is strictly necessary to address a circumstance that immediately and genuinely impairs the habitability of a home during the emergency. So all of that would be thrown out that we just mentioned would be precluded if a genuine need for repairs to habitability in the area of landscaping, trees, irrigation, outdoor maintenance, etc. If those became like an emergency, that's how
somebody's sewer line busts in their front yard and they need a trench dug so they can replace it, they would be allowed to do that.
A tree is, like trees falling or looks like it's going to, right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Jeff, I see you taking notes. What do you got to say about this? Are you going to counter argue here? What do you got?
No, I'm like having this moment where I see that for the next year we're going to be having this discussion about what the government determines to be essential or not essential. Do we really want to let that happen? Do we really?
Well, that's the point. That's the point of all this. That arbitrariness of the government deciding what's right and what's wrong is a reason to protest. It's insane, right? And when you look at the shit that the governor has come up with, and let's just not be mistaken here. I'm again playing devil's advocate, and I'm adding to my passion for this devil's advocacy here, but the executive power is bad, generally speaking. We make laws. We want the government. We didn't elect the governor to make laws. She's supposed to be enforcing the laws. We did not envision her as a person that would be making laws and making these minutiae unilateral decisions on what's essential, what's not essential. That's a legislature's job, we would say, right? So I think some of the disdain of this is that we are sitting in a phase of, since her being coming into office, she is, like our president, a big fan of the executive authority. And when she wants to use it, she will. In fact, she may have even gotten that advice from some lawyers that we know, Jeff, who told her how she should do that for the cannabis industry. And she realized, wow, look at this statute. I can do whatever I want to do. Watch me now. This is how I'm going to do it.
See, but that kind of disputes your argument, though, Michael, when you say that the law is supposed to be made by the legislature, but yet we've created all these different tools for governors to be able to have power that exceeds the legislature. The governor can declare state of emergency. They can deploy National Guard or all of those different things. There's many different powers we give the governor, including the power to make decisions in emergencies like this. So we've established a whole system that allows it. Notice 50 state governors doing exactly the same thing. 50 state systems all set up to allow emergency powers for the governor. Has any state overruled any governor's ability to do this? No. So when I say they've got the authority, the proof is in the pudding, baby.
Well, and it's for emergency purposes, and it's for a limited amount of time. It's within reason. It's not just creating a new law.
That is, listen, with all due respect, and I understand what everyone's saying, executive power is executive power. I don't care if it's Democrat Gretchen Whitmer or President Republican Trump, because he's tried to do the same thing. Then he would like these executive orders for not letting certain immigrants into the country or immigration policy, just declaring some shit executive order. That's executive power. It's not supposed to be that way for any executive leader. That's not how it goes. And the way
Michael,
that it
you just had a court decision where they said half of her decision on executive power was absolutely correct, that she did have the right to designate them as essential or non-essential. It reinforced her ability to do that. So
Okay, but some of it wasn't. Some of it wasn't. This is a declaration that she, may have gone too far. There may be something arbitrary about this, or there's some. But the point I'm trying to make is this: the emergency is in the eye of the beholder. Donald Trump would say that our immigration policy has created a country of emergency, country in a state of emergency, and if he doesn't act, we're gonna. The whole, they're bringing drugs. This is not the best, whatever. It's a whole spiel. He believes that. Other people believe that. It's fine. And that is their perception. They could tell you a story, whatever. I mean, we all may disagree with it, but he's the executive. When he sees emergency, he's going to use his authority. That's the problem. It's inherent to government, and we should guard it, watch it, and criticize it often and not let it become the norm. It is not the norm. It is not the norm, and only in limited, rare, existential, dramatic situations.
Like a pandemic in which many people die and get really ill.
Right.
Understood. But when you are infringing in such a wide reach, right? And arguably in some areas maybe too far.
Well, so then, after the fact, it's determined that the science didn't really support the level of rules that she imposed on this, and so that gets taken into consideration to how well she handled the situation. That might show up, when she runs for her second term. But to during this virus, during a pandemic, to go out and gather like that is at minimum irresponsible. I use harsher words than that typically, but just for these purposes.
And again, the court just affirmed her ability to make restrictions. It just said some of her restrictions are correct, some of her restrictions are wrong, and that implies her ability to restrict is real. So anyone that argues otherwise is not using common sense or law.
I brought that up because as I read the quote from our friend with the beard, how he was decreeing this not, constitutional. We have a court that says that it is, and would have, but not all of it, and this is just a circuit court, and who knows? It's not, it's a circuit court. I've been in a lot of situations. I've got one of these. I was like, this is crap. I'm going to the Court of Appeals. Trust me. You know what I mean? But it is some guidance on this. It does codify the reality. And I'll say something else. The executive orders are not absolute. I mean, when she institutes an executive order, I think there's Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but the legislature has 60 days to reject it or amend it or something like that after they. And there was, Jamie, you remember this. We were talking about this a little bit when initially when the board was being eliminated. I know that there was some talk about it, them trying to implement some kind of emergency order, but they wanted to discuss that with the legislature because they have the right to reject it. And I think they did that. Didn't you want the extension of the executive order? And they rejected it.
There's an approval process, right, for that.
Right. So it's got some checks and balances going forward, but
may I just say that the recent poll indicated 70% of Michigan residents were happy with Governor Whitmer's handling of the crisis. Just wanted to say that.
Yes, I agree. I've read that too.
No, that's great.
I've seen higher.
I think she's doing just fine.
Yeah, I think she's got this. I feel confident with her. I do. I think she's got this.
Stuff with emergency and stuff was one of my extra duties. And seeing how a major incident such as this can unfold and become a shit show really quick, I think she's acting just fine.
Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you guys this question.
This thing could go sour really fast if the hospitals start piling up and the demands of the system become too much. It can really become a shit show. So
we've got that in Detroit already. They've got bodies stacked up in these hospitals. We've seen pictures of it.
Henry Ford, 50 dead bodies at Henry Ford Wayne when they shut that, or Beaumont Wayne when they shut it down.
Hey man, the place where John was, he just got out of it just in time. It had a really
one day before they locked that place down. We could have lost John to this shit because they're having half the residents are testing positive.
John Sinclair, they're talking about, not John Schlicker.
We're talking about John Sinclair.
Right on. Sorry about that. John Schickler's right there.
But there's 14 different nursing homes that feed into Sinai Grace Hospital, which is part of the medical center. And they have the highest death rate, I think, in the nation, they said. Because they're older people. They're nursing homes for a reason. I mean, these are very sick individuals. And John was in this place, in one of these places. The day before lockdown, we couldn't lose John. We could have lost John. They've got bodies piled up at Sinai Grace. I've seen pictures of them on the floor. They didn't even have space in the morgue for them.
Family can't be around them.
No.
Yeah.
And, the people already coming down in homes, most of them are not doing so well anyway. So you come in with the virus sweeps through there. It doesn't take much. These people are.
It doesn't take much. And so they've got a really high death rate. But what we're saying is John was in with them because he had just had a heart attack. So he had to go in a nursing home for about 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks to try and, rehab a little bit before they sent him home. He got out by the skin of his teeth because I fear, what would have happened. Oh, my God.
Well, what's unique about a nursing home? They don't go outside.
Well, no, they have the. No, I understand. Well, some of them do. John goes outside. I mean, if you need to.
No. Okay, so listen. First of all.
Jamie?
What's that?
One more.
You guys took John outside, didn't you?
Never did. We saw him a couple times. We were going to go outside, but it never happened.
Yeah, we never did. But I mean, you can. They have a courtyard, and people can go outside.
Well,
let's face it, like nursing home's a death sentence, kind of.
It is.
Yeah.
He was there for rehab, but yes, it was like the.
Yeah, he was there for rehab, but it is. I know it is. It's a horrible thing, but I'm just saying it doesn't mean that these are not human beings that we should
but like
be concerned.
honestly, we should be like taking people outside, and probably would help them a lot.
It would. Outside.
Yeah, they don't make it easy around in there. We have to have a special code for the elevator. And
Dude, we got trapped in the elevator and shit. Because they're afraid people will escape. So you gotta have like codes and shit to get out. And so of course we're too dumb to remember the code. We have to get someone to rescue us.
Michael, is that a picture of you golfing? Is that you in the background there?
That's my new background. I'm switching every 15 minutes. Just rotating.
We had a bunch of nursing home adventures.
Listen, Jeff Frazier is a big fan of being the outside is the thing. Now this is a confusing point. Stay home, stay at home. Don't go out unless you have to. Make sure you exercise, right? Make sure you exercise. Can't go to the gym. Go out. Can't go outside. Stay home unless it's urgent and an emergency. But make sure you're staying healthy. Make sure you're exercising. What? I mean,
you can run through the park, Michael.
You can run through the park.
The parks are closed. The state parks are closed.
I run through the park.
You can be outside with not in a group. That's all.
Open the golf courses. Open the golf courses, for God's sake. Seriously. Look at that. Look at that. That's a golf course. Just kidding. I'm joking. I'm just playing around. I'm just playing around.
They have to slob down your cut. Doesn't matter. What the fuck, Michael? Jump on your trampoline. Strengthen up your abs and your legs and whatever. Run around the yard with your kid. Ride a bike. You got a bike.
Take a before and after pec pic. That's what we want.
Michael, do you have one of those Pelotons? Do you have one of those Peloton bikes?
I got it. Listen, you want me to do that? I can show you my.
Don't endanger somebody else for your recreation. That's all. You can do what you can just don't endanger.
Listen.
First of all, designer mask.
I went to read
saying that.
Let me read something real quick. The opinions and comments expressed on this show by host, commentator, post may not represent the actual opinions of said host.
Disclaimer filed. Yes.
Devil's advocate. We understand the concept. We get it.
Michael, from Facebook, Daryl Berry says he would like the sun to come out. If you wouldn't mind telling the sun to come out.
Okay, we can do this.
It's scheduled to come out tomorrow.
Hold on. Let's take a vote here. Let's take a quick vote here. How many people could see the preclusion of golfing beyond the executive authority? This is golf, for God's sakes. Golf.
Okay. No golf until 2021.
I could get a shot personally.
No, but I think when you start talking about classifications of businesses, when they allow tattoo parlors, when they allow hair cutting, they'll allow golf courses too.
No. Listen. With all due respect, you are outside. By virtue of the way the game is played, you are socially distanced.
You have employees that have to cater to
There's no employees. Show up.
There's 4 of you guys plus 4 caddies, and you're all huddling together and slobbering on each other. And
somebody's got to charge the electric carts in the morning. Somebody's got to refill the balls. You know, you see a groundhog and you get all freaked out.
You can't escape transmittal when you're getting your balls washed.
Everybody's dropping their balls into the hole and then pulling them back out again. Come on. This is all kinds of exposure. Right. Holy shit.
I could shut down every single. I'm going to. Let me start. Okay. Number one, there is no carts. There are no employees. You pay online. You show up. You got your glove. You got your bag. It's on your back.
And everybody's all bunched together.
8, 12, 15 feet away. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm walking. I'm in my lane. I'm focused. I don't want to hear from anyone. This is golf. It's you and the golf course at a distance outside. Jeff, it's outside. Jeff, come with me. It's outside. It's outside. Number one, it's outside.
I don't believe there's any way they're going to let people just run around the golf course.
How about this?
How about this? Just run around and do what you want.
It'll be phased in. It'll be phased in like other businesses. And maybe it'll come in. And maybe it'll come in earlier because there's less room.
Your argument is as weak as people who
weak. You laid out all the people one is going to interact with, and I gave you there will be none. Those things don't even exist
because they're not going to allow you to just run around.
Those things do exist.
You got to stop the gas pump, just like boating.
That's right. You got to get out there.
You got to go in and have your drinks or your meal after.
First of all, if anyone is touching a gas pump and putting it to their face, you almost deserve to get a disease, okay? Because that is the center of, I mean, if you even realize that is a place where all disease brews, and that's a place that you're going to pick something up, and it's
the worst place.
Pump love is real, baby. Don't hate on Pump Love. Come on now.
They say it's the worst.
Don't rub your taint on the gas pump.
Pre and post COVID
are very bogus.
All right. Okay.
No golfing for you until Gretchen tells you it's all right.
Well, and here's the problem. Here's the thing, Michael, and it goes back to something someone said earlier, because it's almost like a new morality in it, because we should be acting as if we're infected, as if we are, not as if everyone else is.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And so it's kind of turning a lot of our assumptions upside down.
It's just a caddy. Who cares?
There's no caddies. As an infected person, as an infectee, if that's how I'm living, let me play some fucking golf on my way out. I mean,
who sterilizes the cart once you're done?
There's no cart. I'm gonna walk. There's no cart. I'm carrying my bag. That's how golf is meant to play. Look at that. Look at my picture. Look at my picture. Look at my picture. Is there a caddy? That's a bag with a carry.
Yeah,
you see that on there? It's a carry. I'm carrying that bag.
There's caddies right there, right on the side by the bags. There are caddies right there.
I don't know what golf world you live in. Caddy.
Here's where we're going to have
the devil's advocate pretense is all gone now. You're just way too emotional for this to be a fake position you're just taking, right?
Full disclosure. Full disclosure.
Your opinion's totally the opposite, right?
Full disclosure, I'm a recovering golf addict. You know that, right? So this has caused a lot of reoccurrence of some emotions. I'm sorry if I got a little.
Practice your putting in the backyard. You've got a nice yard. Practice your putting back there with your son. Teach your son some basic golf skills.
I saw my neighbor doing that, putting in his backyard.
Putting in the yard. There you go.
So your
son could be the next Tiger King Williams.
But he can't get the lawn cut right now. So he's out in a big jungle.
You know what? I need these guys. I need Nicholas Daniels Landscape Supplies to come out and fucking cut my green for me so I can putt on it. I can't do that myself. Come on. Special landscaping.
No, the dude with the weed whacker can come. Your buddy, the attorney with the weed whacker, can come and clear a little green area.
The logic whacker.
That's right.
So here's something else. Here's a phenomenon that's associated with this, and maybe some of our listeners that are parenting at home may sympathize that have kids and whatnot. You know, we're as parents before the virus, like we're all dealing with the challenges of the technology as we raise children. You know, they're everywhere. You know, what age do you give your kid a phone? Do they get a phone? Should they have a phone? In schools, they're challenged by this. Are they going to fight it? Are they going to embrace it? You know, there's all different types of philosophies of how you're going to educate. Do we, you know, traditional versus allowing all this technology? And if so, how are we going to utilize it? So as a parent, like I'm always, you know, thinking like, what is too much of that? And, you know, when does it become, you know, kind of into the negative? But now as we sit at home, that concept of what is too much is out the door, because every single conversation and interaction of my children beyond just within the house is on these electronic devices. You know, the schooling is now electronic. Their games and interaction with their children, other friends of theirs are all that way. So the idea of, you know, maintaining some discipline of the screen time is a concept. You know, like we looked at my daughter's the phone that she uses for in the screen time. We checked it from pre-virus to after. It's probably double. You know what I mean? Because that's how we're all living right now. I mean, does anyone else feel that way? That it is, you're using your phones and computers more than ever, and it just becomes kind of overloaded because of this?
The only one who has kids is Jim, and I think he stepped out with his kids for a few minutes, didn't he?
But, you know, we've really been using Zoom and GoToMeeting and the Skype and doing all those things. All the broadcasts, which would be like our Thursday gathering, our Tuesday gathering, those have all gone digital. So I mean, in my instance, I've learned a lot more technology during this crisis because that's how I've had to up my game as a broadcaster. I mean, I think most of us would agree with that.
I like the Zoom. I would admit I like the Zoom because instead of what, you know, normally you'd see people and you talk on the phone to them. Now you don't see people, so I want to video with them. You know what I mean? So it makes the human contact a little bit more meaningful, or if some human contact, or But from the parents' perspective, I'm just saying, Jim, do you know what I'm talking about? If you were trying to control some of the screen time, those days are kind of over because now, they're calling in for school on screen time. It's around all the time. They take a break. They interact with their friends on, through it. There's a lot of online gaming. That was the direction a lot of this was going anyways, with kids interacting, some of these kind of virtual, gaming things and whatnot, where you're just all playing online and things like that. What do you have to say about that, Jim Powers?
He's not here. He stepped out with the kids.
Out with his kids.
Okay, good, because they left their screen.
Oh, he's probably,
you and him were the only one with
policing
kids.
the screen time.
Right.
Yeah, like 15 minutes ago. Because they were, his kids are little, like Nathan. He's got a little one too.
They were giving the wife some crap about not wanting to turn their devices off. That's right. So Jim had to go down and lay down. Jim was summoned accordingly.
Oh, it's 9:30.
I was kind of wondering about Michael yelling so loudly in a house with young kids at 9:30 at night. So.
I know.
Yeah, Michael will come up here to go settle him back down.
Don't get Mrs. Komorn mad at Planet Green Trees now. We don't want that kind of badness.
My kids have earbuds.
Should we take a break and take Steve's movie review?
Yeah.
Yes, we have all those
After
things
a break.
Perfect timing. Good job, Amanda. We're going to come back and talk about Monster, and we're going to have a movie review from Stephen Miller, Fly Like an Eagle. We'll be right back. Jeff Frick.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today, michiganmedicalmarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today, michiganmedicalmarijuana.org.
Whoops! Did state lawmakers accidentally legalize marijuana in Ohio? Some top law enforcement officers say yes. Columbus City Attorney says the decision is based on complications after the state legalized hemp. On July 30th, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed Senate Bill 57 into law. It legalizes hemp in Ohio and changes the definition of marijuana to exclude hemp based on the amount of THC. Now we have to be able to distinguish the difference between hemp and marijuana, said Vice President of the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police. That is not possible for a human being to do. That has to be done through crime analysis. The executive director of the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association agrees. This bill de facto legalizes marijuana in Ohio, at least for the time being, said Louis Tobin. We raised this concern with legislators during debate of the bill. It's disappointing those concerns were rejected. Whoops. Anybody want to go to Cedar Point?
time it is. All the way from the legendary Russell Industrial Center in the heart of Detroit City comes Hyped Up Live Sessions. We've created a show to bring the very best talent from Detroit, from around the world, to you sitting on your couch. Yeah, with your host, your boy T-Money Green, you bound to see some hell of a talent, baby, for sure. Couch concerts coming up. You could be the next artist to perform on a Hyped Up Live stage. Yeah, you know me, or if you don't know, check it out. From the Dramatics to George Clinton to Snoop Dogg, my resume speaks for itself. If I said I'm bringing you the very best, I'm bringing you the very best in entertainment. Hyped Up Live Session, the way we wish you would experience Detroit music.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law. Komorn Law can take your case from arrest all the way from trial, appeals, and even to the Supreme Court. The team at Komorn Law has the compassion and the experience you can look to for help in your time of need. Komorn Law has over 25 years experience in criminal defense. We have accomplished numerous legislative changes through community involvement and lobbying. Our award-winning law firm has a reputation like no other for keeping overreaching government accountable and in check. We have built Komorn Law for people who need lawyers to stand up to the system, fight back and win. Once we become your lawyer, you become a part of our family. Don't settle for less, just ask our clients. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.
Today, the world is gathered to find out who we are. So who are you? Because who you are, do you know, is who we are. So check the boxes appropriately. You will be asked a series of questions. How many? Answer the questions as honestly and as fast as you can. Who are you? Are you up? Are you down? Are you in? Are you out? Are you hard? Are you soft? Are you found? Are you lost? Are you on? Are you off? Are you walk? Are you talk? Are you chill? Are you hot? Are you ready? Are you not? Are you up? Are you down? Are you in? Are you out?
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
we are back. Thanks for staying with us. Planet Green Trees, episode 461. And we were talking about some COVID stuff for a change. We've got Steve Miller in the queue here to review a couple movies for us, which we're much looking forward to. And I want to put that into context. There, and I was going to just mention, Jeff had brought up a point about some of the prisoners that currently are in jail and have been, left there, and nobody is really contemplating what impact that whole population of people maybe being exposed to and what impact that may have afterwards. I mean, if everybody follows all the rules and there's all this, breeding of disease within the jails, it could all be for naught, one might say. Disabuse me, please, but it's certainly a X factor that, even under the most successful situations is not accounted for and is operating in a method that actually is contrary to the principles of the lockdown, and certainly an unknown factor that in and of itself could arguably, have an impact like it's having right now, one could say. So it's certainly, and I know that the ACLU had partnered with another law firm and are suing in Oakland County the release of people from the Oakland County jail for the reasons associated with the virus. But also, if anyone has had a client or there's the unfortunate reason to be there, they will tell you that place is a breeding ground for disease. I think they give out hepatitis C shots while you're there because they know you're going to contract it, or hepatitis B, because there's, feces and urine and vomit everywhere within the holding tanks, as a regular process. So I'm just saying to visualize the sickness and disease and spread of that takes place within the jail and prison system is not uncommon, and something that may not have been thought about or accounted for because people continue to be held and suffer. Another important point from all this to think about when we talk about the recovery of the economy is that our economy is going to fail now because maybe this is Jeff Frazier's concept before. The economy, if it fails now, it's because the non-essential businesses have been shut down, which really means our economy, when it's thriving, is operated because of non-essential businesses, right?
Yep.
If all the non-essentials are shut down right now, and I don't know any other way to interpret it other than if these things are deemed non-essential and our economy is falling apart, what does that say for the significance of those businesses? Jeff, somebody jump in on me. I'm ready for it. I'll get my golf club out in a second, but go ahead.
Well, one is, two parts to that. One, prison. What do we do about this situation? Because clearly it's a crisis, and it's a horrific one. The places where you're seeing people dying the most are in prisons, or getting infected, at least prisons and nursing homes. So there's certainly we certainly have, there's a duty, a constitutional duty, to not engage in unusual punishments and excessive punishments. And so we've always been about decarceration. We drug war prisoners, get our people out of the jails, from the for-profit prisons and entire machine and the drug war and what have you. Well, now you've got, this sitting on top of all of the injustices that brought all of the people into this system to where we have 2 million more in this country, and they're on top of each other and sharing air and water and body fluids and everything else. And they are disproportionately Black and Latino. And this is a horrific disease that, the latest statistics come out show 88% of the people who were intubated, who were put on ventilators in New York City didn't come out. They're coming to find that there's some, what they thought about this thing and what they thought about this thing, right? And so we got this situation. And we were asked, I gave advice on behalf of Komorn Law when asked to send some thoughts like this to the governor of Louisiana. They have a horrible problem there. Blacks are, I think, 40% of the population and 80% of the deaths. I don't know. Don't hold me to it, but it's some horrific figure. And Angola prison is 76% Black. My advice was use it as as a pilot study as to how you can decarcerate these people. That you've got people that are old, you've got people that are eligible for parole, you've got people who are in for petty crimes, and get these people outdoors, get them out into the yard. It's a prison farm. Get them outside, get them into tents, get them isolated, and then let's talk about getting them out. And that's what I think that we need to be thinking about. We need to be thinking about getting outdoors, and we need to be thinking very well about, what can we do? Because there's a universe of what in the world can we do? And we need to be asking ourselves these questions. What are we going to do? What can we offer? I think, somebody in our community, we need to be making hemp masks and hemp bedcloths and hemp tents and hemp surgical gowns. We need to do what we know where we are right now.
Jeff, let me ask you this. Don't you think it's time as Americans we ask ourselves, why do we have discarded members of our population? We discard our prison population. We give them less health care than everybody else. We give them less options than everybody else. We discard our elderly. We push them into facilities and don't take care of them properly the way that we should. And then, of course, the urban settings where we have less health care. We're seeing a lot of places like Detroit who have reduced access to health care for the majority of their population. Have a rampant problem with a disease. And that's certainly racially tied. That's been mentioned many times by other people. I'm certainly not the first. So as a society, this is a good opportunity for us to take a look and say, why have we decided these groups of people are not worth what average every other day Americans are worth?
Jeff, you have 30 seconds to answer that. Just kidding. But go ahead, take a stab at that. That's like, why is the world such a bad place? Go ahead.
Yes, we should ask ourselves.
Yes, amen. How fast is that? You're right, brother.
No, yeah, I mean, we see it every day. The cycle and the system of the criminal justice and the revolving door and that's the answer for everything is a failed premise, just like the war on drugs was. But in light of the uplifting conversation we've had and trying to get through this as, common theme discourse, I'm glad to announce the next part of our show, which I know he's been working on for a very long time, and that is Steve Miller's movie review. You ready, Steve? You should know a little bit about Steve Miller because that's fair. He's going to be criticizing some cultural phenomena, and we should all know like what the personality is of that person who's going to be criticizing it. Just a couple tidbits about Steve. He, of course, is a retired police officer. Many of you may not know, but his favorite band is Tantric. Tantric, of all things, obscure 90s band. Right. His favorite movie is Rocky, so keep that in mind when he's reviewing a movie. If he had a time to spend the history in the past, it would have been in the 60s. His most significant moment in history that has led us to where we are today has been the UFO crash in 1947. Roswell, don't question it. I believe this is where we obtain our current level of technology from reverse technology of items recovered from the UFO crash. And his favorite book, The Heroin Diaries by Nikki Sixx. That's nonfiction. Fiction, 11/22/63 by Stephen King. Favorite TV show, Parks and Recs with Amy Poehler.
Yes. I love that show.
That's enough for now. So this is our new movie critic, so you get to know a little bit about him. Please, Steve is going to be reviewing tonight the movie 1917. And I understand it's about
I got another fun one to review if we have time.
Go for it, Steve. Go for it. Do it.
Also, part of my qualifications, Michael forgot to mention, I go to the movies with my son nearly every weekend. So I got a lot of movie watching experience. When they first come out, which is the first movie I'm going to review tonight, is 1917. It came out in theaters on Christmas Day. And my sons and I went and watched that one. It's a epic World War I film, directed, co-written, and produced by Sam Mendes. And I like the story behind this because this was actually, this movie was based on a story his grandfather had told him about World War I. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then also another noteworthy on the movie is the way they filmed it. They filmed this movie to look like it was only 2 different scenes for the whole length of the movie. So when it first came out, they actually was the media was saying it was one long loop of a movie, but in doing the research on the movie, it was actually there was 2 parts. There was a split at 1 hour and 6 minutes in the movie. But the film tells the story of 2 young British soldiers making their way with a message, calling off attack on the Germans. And and it just follows these 2 guys on this trek across country. And the way they did film it as one or 2 continuous scenes, it was really cool. It was a good aspect of the movie. The acting was great. The main stars in the film were George McKay and Dean Charles Chapman. And they were the 2 soldiers. And George McKay, I'd like to make note. Michael mentioned my favorite book earlier, 11/22/63 by Stephen King, was actually made into a miniseries on Hulu, 8-part miniseries. And George McKay, who stars in 1917, is also co-stars in 11/22/63 alongside James Franco. So in my little, I'm inserting a mini review of 11/22/63 miniseries on Hulu is excellent, and the book is fantastic as well. And I recommend you do both.
That's not the one about the virus.
No, 11/22/63 is loosely based around the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's all I'm going to tell you about it.
Okay. All right.
So I'm not going to go into the whole end of the movie and break it. It's based. The story is based in World War I. Follows these 2 soldiers delivering a essential message into the field to stop an attack that would otherwise be doomed. It came out early, was released early to digital because of the coronavirus situation. So you can get this, you can rent this on nearly all the formats, I do believe. So I recommend it. It's a great movie, especially if you're into history and World War I, World War II stuff.
Award-winning cinematography too, right, Steve? Just fantastic,
absolutely.
Beautiful.
It's fantastic. Everything about the movie is good. It draws you in and you're hooked the whole ride through. So it's really good. So I recommend it highly. We'll give it a buds up. How's that?
Nice.
Remember
I like it.
Driscoll and Ebert,
A buds up?
So we'll call it a buds up.
Buds up to that one.
Michael, if the movie's bad, we'll call it synthetic.
There you go. I was going to say this just for statistical purposes. Rotten Tomatoes gave it an 89, consistent with what Steve's saying. Any one of our people within here see the show? See it? I did not see it, but I heard this. As Rick said, I read about the cinematography and this very unique method of the one scene or the 2 scenes that just kind of go on and whatnot, right?
Yeah, it's just so well done, all of it. I mean, the actors, the cinematography, everything. That was just a well put together film.
Anyone
I
else see it?
haven't seen that. I haven't seen it, but I want to see the Hulu series now that you mentioned it.
Oh,
I didn't know.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah.
By the way, how's the movie industry doing right now?
What's up? What?
How's the movie industry doing right now? I think they're having a lot of people going to the movies these days. Is that essential? Okay. There may not be movie theaters anymore when we're done with this. I hate to see that happen.
Well, I know, and I hate to see it happen too. You know how much I like to go to the movies with my.
Back the drive.
I mean, that's a real thing. So
The drive-in, yeah, like John just said, that would be a good idea and way to adapt. There's still drive-in theaters, aren't there set up, but nobody uses them?
One in Dearborn.
There we go.
Hold on, how are we going to get around putting the speaker into isn't there a thing that goes under the window that comes to the?
Well,
we're going to do kiosk setup, Bluetooth connected.
You probably just use your phone these days.
There's like a radio station that they like turn it to like 105.3.
Yeah.
Put a speaker condom on it.
The technology there now. I remember, didn't they have the old radio channel back in the day at the drive-thru?
You could turn it to an AM station and listen to the broadcast. That's absolutely true. Yes.
Yep.
Yep, you can go in your jammies and just sit in the car.
Steve, write down. Steve, take a note. We should look into.
Wyoming.
We should look into.
I'm going to note that on our list.
We should be looking up and into investing in drive-through theaters. Okay, right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Ford, Wyoming.
Cool. By driving.
I got a nice snack bar.
Of our goals. So that kind of leads me to the, speaking of that in the movie industry, the next movie I'd like to do a quick review on is Bloodshot with Vin Diesel.
Oh, Vin Diesel, baby.
Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
So,
there we go. Now we're talking.
My son and I had been seeing the previews on it when we'd go to see other movies at the theater, and we were like, oh, this one's really cool. We're going to go see it as soon as it comes out. And the weekend it came out was kind of when all the coronavirus stuff just started. And I looked at Jake. It was kind of that weekend. Maybe you go out, maybe you don't quite know what to do. I think you guys had the thing up north at Jamie's place that weekend. And I asked Jake, I'm like, do you want to go? He looked at me. He's like, no, he did not want to go out. So as soon as, like 2 weeks later, they made the movie direct to video, digital availability. So we got that and watched it, and it's
what's it called? Bloodshot?
Bloodshot with Vin Diesel. It's a 2020 superhero film based on a Valiant Comics character of the same name. He's follows the story of a Marine who was killed in action, only to be brought back to life with superpowers by an organization that wants to use him as a weapon.
What a
much
unique
like
script.
Jamie Lowell, just like Jamie.
And, despite negative reviews from critics, Michael's probably going to find a poor rotten apples rating on this one. It grossed $29 million worldwide in that first weekend.
And it was just released on video only, right? And it's it hit the theater the weekend. Oh, it did hit the theater, yeah.
Everything down. So that first weekend, it still brought in $29 million with poor reviews.
Everybody's trying to suck their movies.
It depends how pompous of a critic you are. Now,
said that Star Theater in Dearborn spread the virus.
Yeah, they were all watching that Vin Diesel movie. Yeah. I got to tell you, the first time I saw Vin Diesel movie was there. It was there.
You guys are so bad, so bad.
So, anyways, every now and then you got to see the great action film with your great action actors like Vin Diesel or
that's right,
Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone or Chuck Norris. This
Van
is
Damme.
one of those. It's a great action film.
One of the greats.
Great special effects. There's a great plot twist in there, and it's just a fun film to watch.
All those things, they always are.
A buds up, maybe two of them.
Yeah.
It's compare it to like a Terminator or an X-Men with a twist of Rambo in it.
Sounds awesome. I love Vin Diesel. And I seriously did see my first Vin Diesel movie at a Dearborn. It was like XXX or something when I was working at the airport. And I think I've told you guys this before, right before TSA came in, everybody I worked with was foreign born. I went and saw this movie with like 4 Iraqi guys and 2 Iraqi girls. And they didn't speak any English. And they kept saying, "It's Vin Diesel, baby," through the whole movie. That's the only English they spoke to say, "It's Vin Diesel, baby." So that's why I keep saying it's Vin Diesel, baby. And that's how I grew to love Vin Diesel, because they were so excited to see this. It was a great movie.
What's the Rotten Tomatoes score on this Bloodshot? What's
30%. 30%.
Yeah, it's like
30.
30%. By the way, Steve, the backdrop on this is that it is from a comic book series of Valiant Comics, right? That's been around since the 80s. It's not DC or Marvel, but it's like You know,
It's
like the C version, like that. The
like RC Cola
versus Kmart.
Tab.
Your
Tab. Yeah, that's really old school.
Yeah.
I bet you
Those are
Colin doesn't know
pretty valuable.
Tab, right, Gomer?
On the market. The Valiant comics are pretty valuable on the market. If you go
Fresco,
on eBay.
or Fresca. That's another one.
Then
Tab and Fresca.
Fresca.
So,
Tab and Fresca.
Steve,
yeah.
do you think that
Coke.
we could mix in a little bit of Nicolas Cage in next week's movie review?
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
Nicolas Cage,
Yeah.
he's got a million of them out there.
Yeah.
A million
I do like
movies.
his movies. I do like his
too.
Well,
Tommy Lee Jones, too. Do a little Tommy Lee.
National Treasure is a great film. It's a big.
That's a great series. All of those are good.
I really enjoy it. I mean,
Ghost Rider's good. And you know what? I never saw Ghost Rider 2, so maybe I'll watch Ghost Rider. Maybe I'll review the Ghost Rider.
Yeah, there you go. You
First
got to
one
start from
was the best.
beginning and
Yeah,
then
back
do
to
number
back.
2 and
You take
see
us
how
through.
we like it.
Number 2.
You know, how, as opposed to number 2, number 1 and number 2.
Number
Did
1
you
and
see
2.
Parasite?
No, I did not.
No, is that kind of like the Human Centipede?
No, it's like this Korean movie that won a bunch of Oscars this year.
Oh.
It's really good.
Is it
I think
subtitled?
you should watch that, Steve, if I was going to recommend one. It's got a bunch of crazy twists in it, and it was like kept me like on my feet the entire time.
I'm gonna write that down. We'll take a Colin recommendation on a Parasite.
how many explosions in that movie, Colin? Any gun battles?
There is like weaponry and death
give
and
too much of
stuff
it away.
in it.
Weaponry and tomfoolery.
And tomfoolery for sure. It's like it talks about like rich and poor kind of in it.
Okay.
All right.
The class wars.
Class war, yeah, definitely.
Where do we get that? What realm shall I find the Parasite movies? Is that Netflix?
I think it's probably on like Amazon or like Netflix or something now.
Super
You know
popular.
you got all that shit. You
Super
got all that.
popular.
Did you see it, Rick?
Parasite is super popular.
I did not. I don't watch any recent movies other than superhero movies. I'm very picky.
He's
Really
too
good,
cool
though.
for that. Rick's too cool for school.
You got to check it out,
Cool
Steve.
for Bloodshot, Rick?
I looked at the previews for Bloodshot when I saw, goodness gracious, Avengers Endgame, or maybe it was something I saw after that, and Spider-Man Homecoming, because they had been advertising this for a while ahead of time, and I put that right in the list of like Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunter, like nada.
Yes, he's saying he is too cool for.
He's too cool for school. That's
exactly what he's saying.
For the previews turned me off. No, I like Vin Diesel, man. I got a lot of Vin Diesel. I like the Triple X movie.
Triple X was awesome. Vin Diesel.
Are you a Nick Cage fan? Do you like Nick Cage?
As I mentioned before, Nick Cage has got some great films. National Treasure, Leaving Las Vegas. I even like Gone in 60 Seconds, man.
I like Leaving Las Vegas. That's a sad
my
movie.
gosh.
And really,
Gone in
really
60 seconds.
Raising Arizona.
Yeah, Leaving Las Vegas was so
You
depressing.
guys-
Raising Arizona was funny.
I really.
That's the
I-
Coen
I'm
Brothers.
just-
That's the Coen Brothers.
Yeah,
Brilliant,
Raising
right?
Arizona's good. And Face Off with John Travolta. I like that too.
That's good.
They changed
that
the
was
face.
favorite is Liam
not
Neeson.
so-
I like
I
Liam
like it.
Neeson the best out of all the actors right now.
Liam Neeson.
He's my favorite. He's
Taken.
He's got it's Taken. Yeah. Well, are you wait
The
a minute.
A-Team.
What do you?
He was the A-Team. He was the leader of the A-Team. That is a
A-Team.
great movie.
The
Steve Miller.
A-Team.
Steve Miller, The A-Team. Have you seen
The
it?
A-Team. Did you do
Yeah,
it,
that's a
Steve?
good one.
That's an awesome action film.
Oh, absolutely.
Has anyone seen the adaptation of the A-Team as done by the Family Guy, where they all dress up and they're driving around the neighborhood?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. I thought you were going to ask us if we saw Frozen 2.
All right, let's switch over to the let's switch over and trash, since he's not here to defend it, the Monster album, allegedly the best in R.E.M's catalog. Can we do that now? Jim not here to defend
Is
himself.
it fair? I don't think it's fair. I think we have to postpone it.
Can I speak up for? I can speak up for Jim, but it won't have the passion behind it without Jim. So I don't know if it's really good to do it without Jim here.
I think we should
Like
just
this
postpone
baby.
that.
Yeah.
Because I was going to argue that I like green better, the album green better, but
I'm still open to talk about the Warren cannabis dispensary situation too.
Yeah, we can do that. Let's save
Let's go to
Jim's.
that.
Let's
All right,
save him.
fine.
Yeah, that's a good
Maybe
idea.
he'll come in.
Yeah.
All right, so I saw the lead article on that is that Judge Carl Marlinga, former prosecutor of Macomb County, who actually is looking for a new prosecutor, because Eric Smith has been in charge criminally and retired. But as the sitting judge, he made a finding that the
maybe we should put in for it.
Issuance of the marijuana dispensary license in Warren was invalid, and it was set aside. I can give you the details of it. Again, we would go to Jim Powers for his insight into the city of Warren.
Yeah,
the wrong weirdness.
But he's not even here.
Nobody does Macomb County like Jim Powers.
Yeah, well, he's upstairs in his Macomb County living room, not in the basement where he should be. So.
Policing some device usage.
Exactly.
But this is an interesting phenomenon. Let me draw it into this aspect, okay? If we were going to sit around and criticize the existing regulated system, we would say that, yes, we're all happy that it, like in order for it to work, arguably all of the pieces of the puzzle should be in place so that it is the full picture is realized. And what we're finding is that isn't happening because of many reasons, some of which are the strict regulations. But I would blame a lot of it on the cities failing to opt in and get involved. And it's become a, it's been something that has stood in the way of the evolution and organic development of this system. And because of that, for some reason, it's become such a big deal for the opting in, and because there's so few licenses, especially in large, populated counties such as Macomb County, they become, hyper inflated in price, and the issuance of those become, opportunities for all people to kind of monetize. And I think the undercurrent of this article is that there was some nefarious activity that was going on in the Warren City Council that had issued these particular licenses. The Marijuana Review Board committee held 16 secret closed-door sessions from March through July in 2019. And according to Marlinga, these meetings did not even attempt to comply with the Open Meetings Act. The Marijuana Review Committee did not begin these meetings with an open session. It did not then announce going to a closed section, which would be allowed. They just met and decided secretly without any input, which is one of the critical aspects of what local governments can't do. Like, the one thing they can't do is have, a majority of the members meeting privately to discuss city business without it being in public, or at least announcing it. So they failed in that regard, and that seems to be the basis by which the court got rid of and set aside these particular licenses that were issued. There was 15 applicants, and they had the scoring system as it goes that were going to decide who would be the highest, who got the highest score would be then awarded the local license to which they could go and apply to the state. One of the companies that were not granted one of the highly coveted licenses, lucrative license last year, was Happy Trails Group. Does anyone know them? Happy Trails?
Nope.
Okay. They're among 16 that sued the city because they were denied license by Warren, and others alleged the marijuana panel violated the Open Meetings Act, other things holding meetings that were closed to the public. Of course, the city rejected this premise and it did nothing wrong. And but there's been other scandals in the city of Warren, and Marlinga wrote that the committee members had a de facto authority under the ordinance to subjectively rank applicants as each member saw fit, with no criteria whatsoever to limit the individual subjective preferences. That was the problem. The criteria that included such things as moral character, integrity and reputation, financial ability, and experience operating and maintaining marijuana facilities were some of the things to be considered. But unfortunately, that these things were not done in public. There was no feedback. There was no transparency. And when the licenses were issued, they were, of course, challenged because people couldn't, everything seemed to be extremely arbitrary. And the scoring system was, despite intending to have some numerical scoring, it seemed to be totally arbitrary in favor. And of course, more questions were raised because of these.
But Michael, that's really what the original complaint was, that the scoring system itself was arbitrary. But in fact, I think your article says the scoring system itself was upheld by Mar-a-Lago as a valid one, even though it is kind of arbitrary. It was just the methodology through which the meetings were held that disqualified those whole decisions. And in my experience with Warren's situation was that it took them a year to get to where they were at right now, if not a year and a half. And it may take them another year to have another round of successful applicants and go through the whole vetting process again.
Well, I was saying the commentary of the scoring system became inappropriate because it wasn't done in public. Like there wasn't there wasn't like a discourse over the companies, and the neighborhood wasn't able to be heard from. And some of the discussions regarding the scoring themselves was not publicly discussed. And these separate meetings that took place out of the public drew concerns for the court in a very ungovernment, non-transparent way, which I think
Council was told this at the time, though, Michael. I mean, citizen groups complained, and even watchdogs and media representatives complained to the city council that this was not being done appropriately, and it just pushed forward, right?
That's right. And City of Warren's been very strange about marijuana. I would say that I know I've got right. And I've represented people that have been, had businesses there before, people, caregivers, whatever. They were giving out licenses at some point for caregiver grows, if I'm not mistaken, right? They would authorize the medical marijuana caregiving in buildings. Like they thought that was something that had. I mean, listen, Warren's statutes on marijuana are.
Yeah, they claim that a caregiver needed a special city license, and then they wanted to inspect your grows. That was what was going on there. Yeah.
Warren is doing a thing right now. It's kind of
in people's houses. They were talking about, Michael. Not
You're
on,
right.
in people's houses.
They at times have banned home growing.
Yeah, they did.
Which is not allowed constitutionally in Michigan. Furthermore, they're doing a thing right now. It's an interesting phenomenon. Because when you rent a house to somebody, or if you occupy a building, cities are able to. This is established how they can require you to have a certificate of occupancy, which really means that that the city has had a chance to inspect to determine that it's safe to walk into, that any of the liabilities about being within there, falling into a hole, an electrical wire, hitting you and killing you, on safety issues. And this is called the certificate of occupancy, which they, if someone moved into a building that was once unoccupied and started using energy, there's a person in the city building code inspector that is tuned into that activity and is going to want to go there, know who is there, and they're going to use the excuse of, do you have a certificate of occupancy? You can't go in there because we can't assure you that it's safe. This is all allowable. This has already been established. But what the city of Warren has done is they've taken a certificate of occupancy and call it now a certificate of compliance. Other cities are doing this as well. And when they require you to get a certificate of compliance, this is what the document says. Go to the Warren website, look up certificate of compliance. It says, we have to come in to inspect your facility to see if you are violating any laws in Warren's ordinance code. We have to come into your facility to see if you are not violating any laws. This is where they are right now. Just as an example of that city council that promulgated this rule that I'm talking about. Hey, your privacy rights don't exist. We don't need a warrant. We don't need to be suspicious of crimes. Our local ordinance is going to let us come into your place. See it? We wrote it right here. Screw the Fourth Amendment. We're coming in there and we're going to look for some crimes. That's not how it's supposed to be. But that's how they do in Warren.
Yep. That's how they do in Warren.
So it doesn't surprise me that this whole thing got set aside for multiple reasons. But
Warren is very similar to Wyoming, and we know that we had a very famous attorney that sued the city of Wyoming for trying to claim federal law preempted state law. We've seen communities try to overreach and reestablish a new definition for cannabis laws or to suit their own individual whims. That's why we have attorneys like Mr. Komorn and Jeff Frazier to go after these guys.
Does this decision have to assume on some level that the businesses were compliant in this nefarious scheme to have their license taken away from them? And otherwise, don't they have kind of a bitch if they were, even if the decision makers were using some kind of weird criteria, they got awarded a license nonetheless and started pouring money into their project. Are they in a position to?
This is what you call civil litigation. Once you're in it, you are going to spend a lot of money. Right. Any way you look at it, it's going to go on and on and on. You're absolutely right, Jamie. The amount of money they dumped into this, getting the award, the steps they took to tie up the buildings, and now to have them taken away. I mean, I imagine that they still are possibly eligible to be reissued, right? I mean, just because they were set aside, if they go back through the process, it could result in the same kind of outcome, in which case they've minimized their damages to some degree.
Doesn't their illegal behavior constitute malfeasance, which is a very valid reason to be litigated?
The government, you're saying, the city
of Warren operated in a malfeasant way when they operated without regard to the Open Meetings Act.
Agreed. And the question would become whether or not whether the immunity that government officials retain for civil liability can be overcome by that. Jeff Frazier, you got a thought on that? Does violation of the Open Meetings Act as a basis to, as a loss to some citizen, seeking to open a business, is that a basis to sue a local government?
Suing local government is hard. However, a way to undo things that municipalities do or prevent future things that municipalities are trying to do is to attack the Open Meetings Act. If they have not given reasonable notice, if they're acting behind closed doors, and you can show that they have violated most open records, Open Meetings Act, then the remedy is to undo whatever that resolution was. So in this case,
the question was about, does that create a cause of action for those people who were wrongfully given licenses and then had them removed because of the poor action, non-compliant action of council?
That's a precise legal question, isn't it? I typically, suing the government is hard and immunities will attach, except under very limited circumstances. Typically, when an official has violated a clearly established constitutional right, and I mean clearly established. So the taking without it could you make out a takings case? In other words, that the government has taken effectively your business interest without just compensation. It probably passes a square, the straight face test. Yeah, I would say that the law frowns upon wrongs that don't have remedies. So to the extent that they have been wronged, and it is violative of their due process of law and clearly established rules against taking things or otherwise destroying things without just compensation. Sure.
I think they would be less inclined if they were still able to obtain the license even after the fact, right? I mean, some other civilian brought this action to try to undo this. They prevailed. They don't have a license anymore. Whose fault is that? It's certainly not the business people that applied. I don't think the allegations are that they were acting. So the question, they're out of pocket. There's some losses there. Certainly, time has not been. Their invested time and money has been taken away if they are at this point and don't have what they thought they had. But I think there's some remedies that may, minimize this, which is that the as Rick pointed out, the system and maybe even the awarding of them was not the critique or reason for taking the license back. The process was valid. The scoring system was valid. It was that things went on behind closed doors, not in violation of the Public Meetings Act.
Imagine this though, Michael, the very first meeting that they had that was violation of Open Meetings Act. That was the poison, right? At that point, all proceedings after that were superfluous because they were all going to be negated. So for them to continue to hold meetings, perpetuate the process, doesn't that create a bad faith action that actually lengthened the time that it takes for someone to receive profitability in their business?
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. I'm just saying, though, as you pointed out, the process itself, had there not been, it doesn't seem to be any other reason other than this violation of the Open Meetings Act. You know what I mean? So if they just conducted their business in public, the result would have been the same. One would say, right? Because the system, the scoring system was valid, and I'm sure the results, were part of the denial process. Why this one got more points than the other. But the point is that it seems to be that was the reason why. So it's not undoing the whole thing. It's not like they found that these people got paid money to issue the licenses, right? Or they were twisting arms in the back or something like that.
Although the concept to comply with the Meetings Act implies that citizen input would alter the outcome. That's the reason that we allow citizen input. But yes, your point is well taken, and I like the way you said it.
That's what I'm saying. I think the system, so my point is this. So those that hadn't had a license and had it taken away doesn't mean they're precluded. There was nothing they did, right? They can still get in, and for all purposes, they should get a similar type of scoring, and maybe even on the other end of it, end up with a license. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But as far as damages, I'm saying I don't know that it's figured out yet. If they do end up with and I'm sure it's difficult to sue cities, I would say, but I'm sure that that's one of the things they have in mind, and their damages get worse if for some reason they don't end up with a license. But who knows?
They have to have complied with due process. I mean, if there's wrong, then there's an assumed remedy, even if it's injunctive. Because if they have, the state doesn't have to grant you a license, but if they do grant you a license, they can't take it away without due process. So if the process was not due, meaning that you did not have an effective hearing because there was a violation of the Open Records Act, and therefore due process was violated, and it is in fact a violation of the law that should be remedied by some action, I would say, administrative or otherwise. But it being a constitutional issue, you could go straight to the circuit court for injunctive relief. I mean, if have them they'd have to, what the remedy would be, they have to redo the meeting.
Agreed.
And the series of meetings all were encompassing the whole process of making laws. So they would have to redo the first meeting and then every single step that they took previously to arrive at that outcome. They couldn't just have one meeting say, okay, this is what we decided. Here's an open meeting, and then restore everyone's license. I mean, that's not my understanding, right? They have to redo the whole process.
Well, every meeting that was violated the Open Meetings Act because there was not reasonable notice, but certainly if it wasn't open.
Well, let's say if it took them 10 meetings in order to come up with the rules and the winners, right? Do they have to duplicate all 10 meetings they had previously, or can they just say these are the winners and now we're giving you an Open Meetings Act to announce them? Is one meeting sufficient remedy for this entire process, or do they have to start from scratch on the approval process and begin from get?
The tightest argument is that any meeting that violates the Open Meetings Act that results in a taking of someone's license, someone's property, someone's entitlement, without an adequate hearing, meaning the notice and right to appeal or any of those meetings, I would argue violated due process, and the remedy would be that that they're undone and would have to be redone. That's what I would argue. Not knowing more.
We'll have to get some more insight from Carl Merlinga. Maybe he's going to step down and run for prosecutor again. You never know.
Ask him to come on PGT next week. Let's run it by him.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day. We have Gretchen Whitmer was on Planet Green Trees at one point. Jamie, do you remember that way back? I think she was.
Yeah, I requested her. She was a senator at the time.
Was she? She stepped down because she did sit as as the county prosecutor.
She was the prosecutor for a while, but when she came on the show, she was senator. She was a minority leader.
Senate minority leader. Yes.
What was going on at the time? Was it it must have been a marijuana issue, but I know she's had some other go-arounds with
660. I think.
Senate Bill 660.
If I remember correctly.
Oh, right. The making it, like if the federal government.
She made some good addendums, actually, or good amendments. God, what the hell I'm trying to say? Amendments to that. She knew they weren't going to get accepted, but they were really reasonable.
Right.
Pharmaceutical grade marijuana.
Right. And really the writing into the public health code that marijuana is no longer Schedule 1, but Schedule 2.
The call, like she got like her relationship with Korea, and they consider the governor of Maryland like the son-in-law.
So we've covered a lot of topics. I was going to, I know we got some other things to go over here. Jump on in. I think we did the movie review.
And then I think that we were going to talk about the apartment building.
Well, we can just, I mean, it kind of goes back where we'd be back into the discussion over the COVID issue and how we're dealing with it. I mean, I thought it was a heroic move for the Attorney General to step in where this, it's a historic building. A lot of people have lived there in Detroit, and they were evicting 80 tenants from there. And the Attorney General stepped in and enjoined them from doing that during the COVID crisis. Of course, that's a act of passion, et cetera. And I don't think anyone would have been happy to see these people thrown out. But I mean, I think it's fair to say that those that will suffer greatly will be the owners of real estate that are renting or leasing. I think commercial real estate also likewise is going to be a dying market for a while, right? If the businesses that are utilizing commercial spaces to operate are going to struggle, then clearly the impact of that is going to be the real estate that the that houses that those businesses and whatnot. And I think you could identify these, because all this works together. All these different kind of sects work together, right? Business is good, real estate's good, and commercial real estate. And but this is, I mean, the first thing is here. You got these landlords, owners of real estate throwing out. I mean, you think maybe they want to do it. Maybe they're terrible people, but I'm sure they would rather be paid and not have to conduct their business. And the idea that they're doing this in this environment is really offensive. And I don't know, probably bordering on criminal, which is why the Attorney General stepped in, and I applaud her for that. But it raises the question of, what if you're a landlord? What if you own a building? What if you're trying to collect rent? And, this is your business. This is how you live. You can't feed your family because you're not getting rent from the people. You know what I mean? You may have worked your whole life and, invested in some real estate. People tell people to invest in real estate. It's not usually a good investment or whatnot. But if you're leasing, and if you own commercial real estate, you want to get a business in there that's going to work and operate and, pay their rent and whatnot. So there's two things here. One is, yes, good job. And of course we applaud that, but that's just a little blip on the radar of scenarios like this that are going to be coming up all over the place. At what point does the Attorney General say, you know what? I'm not going to interfere with them not paying. You know what I mean? Like at what point is this going to last for?
Well, there's a moratorium on it. I thought the governor issued a moratorium on evictions and utility cutoffs and things of that nature. So, you're arguing something that's already on the books.
Yeah, what I'm saying, she's enforcing the moratorium that was already stated, right?
Fine, but the point is this, and I'm not suggesting that the eviction was appropriate. What I'm suggesting is that this is a reality, right? If this crisis we're going through, it's saying that people that own buildings can't collect rent, and they shouldn't expect to. And despite the fact that you've contracted with these people that you're going to provide them housing and they're going to pay you for that, that doesn't matter anymore. And you making a living on that, it's over. So that's fine. That's the order. That's the way it is. That's our executive order. So that's what we're living in right now. And these folks who, for whatever reason, the idea that they're going to have money to pay their rent in 3 months from now may be just a slow death You know what I mean? Or the slow reality that's never going to come to fruition. And this is going to happen over and over and over again. My question is, when does the government say, you know what, the moratorium's over, and and despite that, we can't help you anymore? I mean, you know what I mean? At what point does this seemingly, government heroic act, one would say, terrible for the business owner, one would say, when does that no longer matter? When does the government's involvement in the economy?
Maybe when people stop dying. I mean, when people are done dying, then emergency measures can be lifted. Because right now,
people
what can
stop
you do?
dying. What do you mean people stop dying? People die every day. Sometimes
but
more
Michael,
people
not
die.
like this. This is a special circumstance.
Okay, well the curve. Okay, so let's say the curve evens off tomorrow. So does that mean these folks are going to be out on the street?
But it's not going to even off tomorrow. We know
we listen to the experts in the field who are making conclusions based off the data, and we follow their advice.
Yeah, that's it. And there's nothing more we can do. And everybody's making sacrifices.
What the fuck does that mean?
Here.
Stop.
People are not being put out on the street. They're protected. They're not being put out on the street.
That's not banter. That's directly what's happening with decision-making process right now. The governor speaks to those people and then bases her opinion on how to roll back based on the numbers. It's the data that decides. It's the science that decides.
Good talking points. Save that for somebody that wants to argue about that. That's not what we're talking about. I'm not. I get those are the talking points. That's the position. Let me say this. At what point, when people aren't paying their rent, is the government going to say you can't evict people? I'm just wondering. What point is the government going to keep?
They've already said that. They've said that already, that you can't.
For how long? When the scientists say so, that the government can no longer, that the government can tell people that they have no right to collect rent or that they can't evict people.
So what do you want
the scientists are going to tell us that?
To do? Throw these people onto the sidewalk?
That's not. Listen.
Well,
there will be a point. There will be a point where the people no longer can hang on.
It's a snowball effect because if they're getting the stimulus money or the unemployment or whatnot, it's still what's happening.
If they're not able to use that to sustain their rent, they will get kicked out eventually.
Absolutely.
And my understanding is they were mostly retirees who are receiving Social Security and pensions anyway, so they've been consistently paying the rent out of that pool of money. I'm sure that's not everybody,
now what happens when Joe, the electrician down the street, who has been supporting his family on this, all of a sudden gets determined non-essential, gets to stay home, and then he's not able to pay his rent for let's say 3 months
a week.
Housing industry is eligible for President Trump's small business stimulus.
How is he getting?
Housing industry can get that stimulus. They can get that small business relief.
Who says? I've seen several people who are self-employed that are rejected from the stimulus program. It is true, unfortunately.
If they file taxes, well, then they were hiding and not filing their taxes.
Well, it doesn't matter what the situation is.
Deb, do you know anyone that got their PPP payments? Do you know anybody?
A couple, yes.
Who?
Yes. Chad Morrow, his roommate did. I've seen pictures of their checks or their direct deposits.
What are we talking about? Are we talking about the $1,000 for the month? That's not what I'm talking about.
No, the $1,200.
Okay, that is something. That is some welfare shit or whatever. I don't even unemployed. I'm talking about small business. Small business loan.
I don't know.
Nobody's gotten that.
Don't tell me. Who applied for one? I don't know anybody who applied for one. I don't know a single person who applied for one.
Because you guys don't know what you're talking about. You guys don't know what you're talking about. The government is failing us all. Just so you know, they got this money. Where is it? The banks are supposed to give it out. They don't want to do it. You think the banks deal with small business people ever? No, they loan to big companies. They have to deal with small. They never do this. The money's nowhere. No landlord is getting money from the government. The government is preventing them from doing business. That's a point. Listen, I love these people should not be kicked out, right? But if you're in the business of real estate, how long is the government going to stop you from being able to conduct your business? How you can't, you know what I mean? I can't get someone else into my business.
As long as they stop other business.
Go play golf, whatever. If that's what you want to do, play golf, collect.
I don't think it's
look. All businesses are affected equal. So the Subway sandwich guy, the housing guy, the guy that runs a dairy farm.
That's what we all forget is each of us have our own position on this, and it's dependent largely on what our individual situation is. So my situation is probably not going to be the same as Rick, your situation. Okay. because the nature of what I do on a daily basis is different than what you do. So therefore, the way that this whole thing is affecting me may be completely different than the way that it's affecting you. And not any one of these points is, not a good point. There's going to be a time in which all of these things have to be addressed, including all of the small businesses who cannot receive the funding to continue to operate. And I mean, you're bailing out. But at what point does that stop? And how are we going to get out of that?
And therein lies the real issue, Amanda. And you said it in a much more calm way, I think, that I was trying to get to.
We also discussed it.
The premise of all this is at the end of the day, the government is going to save us. I'm sorry. I am not going to accept that. They have fucked us over for too fucking long. Whatever's happening right now, whatever decisions are being made right now, it is arbitrary and capricious. If I can't get there's $300 million, whatever the billions of dollars is gone.
Golf that you think that the economy is more important than people? I mean, come on, and life and health, Amanda. I understand the situation you're in. I do.
It's not about getting our hair done, Deb, or having.
I'm not talking about Deb.
I'm talking about Michael. He's all the friends about golfing and
Deb. I'm not talking. Deb, I'm not talking about golf.
We can do for a while. We can't do anything about it. If we start moving too quickly on this, we're going to have a big explosion in the wintertime when it's going to be worse in the winter, and we have to do it all over.
Allowing a bunch of people to get kicked out right now exacerbates the problem. To say they can't leave, it makes sense for everybody's health and safety.
Nobody's saying they should be kicked out.
It's a death sentence if they get kicked out. It's a death sentence. What I'm saying is like, how do we recover from that? Because you're putting everybody in a spot, not only
it's a brand new
tenants.
Man, really tough times. Really tough times.
We're going to make some mistakes along the way. We will make some mistakes.
We have no other choice but to rely on our dear old government. You might as well get down and pray to the government gods because they are controlling everything. Our rights are being slowly taken away. The businesses aren't going to open. And we are in a pattern of economic destruction. So when we get there, where are we going to be? The legislature put money for small businesses that are not getting there. It should be a significant factor that this is not going to happen. There's going to be no savings. We're all going to be arguably in a very bad economic state down the road. We're all going to be affected differently. And the idea that we are, and everyone here is resoundingly trusting our government. I just want you to know that because
but there's nothing we can do to change the whole situation, Michael. We can't do anything.
Government
right now.
Like the virus.
Michael,
this is based on the pandemic.
You're making a lot of observations, but not offering any alternatives, though. You're making a lot of observations, but
what I'm saying is this. I'm saying to this. I know we are all resolved, and there's nothing we can do about the current state of affairs. The question that was brought up here with this article was that, the idea that the government's interfering with the conducting of business is not the norm, right? But they're doing that every day, everywhere. Fine, we're doing it for the health and safety of the public, and I'm okay with that. But this is an act that is not the normal. It will have an impact that we don't know what that's going to be yet, and at what point, because if the government says go back to work, okay, then people go back to work, but the work for landlords is they start evicting people. So is the government going to participate in that? And that's one sector of our economy that the government, that the government may play a role in. Maybe housing, something that they take some control over. Maybe they're, some kind of compassionate act of some kind that they're going to try to save the old and the sick that are getting evicted. I don't have a problem with that. But the phenomena that I'm talking about is just it's a concern because our economy, our religion, the United States is religion, not a religious country. Our economy, capitalism is our religion in the United States. Let's be honest. And the idea that the government is now controlling that at its greatest level, I don't know, is a phenomena that I understand why people are getting upset about. And as we do this, and listen, I get we're going through this, but I don't know. I don't know what the answers are.
In all things, we have to make decisions.
Some of it's just really frustrating.
In all things, and Jamie, you're right. This is very frustrating. But in all things, we should always consider what's best for the people of the United States of America, the men, the women, and children that make up our nation. Their safety and health comes first, and then business concerns and capitalism second. I sort of reject your premise that we so worship capitalism that we have to embrace that at the expense of human safety.
Rick, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, only
you don't have to. That's just my statement. And I
understand, but under normal circumstances, our government does not act like you're describing. Under this pandemic, they've said, okay, we're in an emergency. We're going to act like we care. We're going to act like we have sympathy. We're going to act like we're going to give money out and care about these people. They don't. Every day, tragedy to humans happens. They're bleeding, dying, and the government's throwing fucking people in jail for marijuana. This is the reality we live in. So the idea that they're going to somehow be our mother and breastfeed us and bring us to fucking health again is a problem for me. I don't accept that, and I have very little faith that they're going to be able to function in the other side of it. They've proven just in this urgent time of the need to get the money from the federal feds to the states for small business, it hasn't happened yet. How many, we're going to the second month.
But I love you, Michael. But if you're so critical of the government's operation on a day-to-day basis prior to this crisis, then clearly you're not looking at government and giving them a fair shake when you evaluate their performance during this crisis. And look, as a drug war advocate, we've all seen the government do heinous things. We've seen people put in jail that shouldn't have been there. We've seen children ripped from their mother's breasts. We've seen heinous things none of us should have to have dealt with. So we believe in the government's ability to screw you badly. But at some point, there has to be some faith that there are people inside our government are actually working on our best behalf. I look at Fauci. I like this guy. I look at the people that are getting fired by Trump. I like those people that are getting fired by Trump. But
yeah, me too.
We have to have some sort of faith in the system. If we just say the system's always going to screw us, then that's a pretty bleak outlook as a human, my brother.
Yeah. In a slightly different perspective, not even faith. There's an objective truth here of the pandemic, and the response by government's been appropriate.
Okay, listen to me.
Maybe there's a chance right here.
Completely different. The idea that I should have faith in our government is a for me it's not a
you don't have to have faith in the government. You don't maybe have people.
Sorry.
Because we can change it, and this is an opportunity with this pandemic. It's an opportunity for us to all step up and figure out a way to change the way the basic way things have been operating.
That's different. That's different than what's being said here. Having faith in the existence of what's happening is something completely different. I agree with you, because really what I'm seeing from this pandemic, if we're not all seeing, is that it has exposed how terrible our fucking government is. How awful we've been governing ourselves. How all these terrible things are taking place that are being exposed of. The number of cases that aren't really essential, that just go ahead and fucking don't come to court, we'll see you whenever we decide. The people in jail that just get released. The fact that all of our medical supplies are being built in China so companies can save 2 cents on the dollar, and we can't even get them into the country for the people that aren't affected by the COVID virus. These are problems. This is our government. These are problems that they never thought about. They should be held accountable for. And the idea that they're going to have a solution for me on the other end of this and somehow give a shit about not me, but any of you, any of them, any of the populace, the thing you're talking about, Rick, the people, they don't give a fuck about the people, because we land here today. It's a bit of trail of, we don't give a fuck about you. We give a fuck about corporations.
Michael, everybody that votes in every election everywhere disbelieves what you just said. We all believe that there's a role for us to play in government, and that we participate in government with the expectation that benefit is going to come from us into society. So I know it's difficult, man, in our role, and especially what you've seen as an attorney dealing with this so long. But I mean,
and in this particular situation, you have a governmental response to a scenario that we can identify and substantiate, and it's reasonable based on what we know. If this now, when you say arbitrary, and you're talking about that before, maybe the governor takes some things too far, doesn't do enough somewhere, but generally to respond and to lock things down and to do what it takes to get this under control is not unreasonable. And it doesn't mean it's going to last forever.
Jamie and Rick, you guys should have to do some homeschooling for a few months. That's all I'm saying. Just kidding. You guys need like 3 kids running around the background, on devices and playing the Roblox or whatever.
I raised my 3 already. I've done it.
I know.
That's right. We did.
Everybody should have to parent during a pandemic, just to make it fair. Just some,
I never had to do that. That is extraordinary circumstance, which is medal deserving as far as I'm concerned. So.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I hope it doesn't go back to the way it was before, because it kind of sucked the way it was before. A bunch of things sucked. We have a chance to make it better, and we can do it. And I believe in the people. I don't have faith in this government and the leaders right now, but I believe in the people. I believe in you guys. I believe in the people I know. So, and that's what we need. It's got to be all of the people together, though. It can't just be us 10 or us, however many are listening right now. It's got to be everyone that's combined, And like you said, Michael, this is exposing all of the big gaps. It's showing us exactly what we need to fix. So that's kind of a gift in some ways.
Jeanette is playing.
Always gotta find the good in all the bad.
Thank
there
you,
you go,
John. Yeah.
There you go. Jeanette is bridging what appears to be it may be semantic, in terms of the way things are being said. Because I think
I'm like Leslie Knope on Parks and Rec.
There you go. But I was going to say this, in this economic uncertainty, we're all going to go through some personal adversity, and these are the types of things that can sink us all, right? We all, I mean, if you're not, everyone's, trying to survive out here. But as I think the point I was trying to make is that it's the survival here is not going to come from the government. It's going to come from our own personal ability to persevere, to overcome, and we all have that in us, right? I mean, that, and if there was ever a time for humans to be rise to the occasion, it's now. And that's really what this is a representation of. It's how we all individually are going to rise up and bring ourselves as a community up. The idea that the government's looking out for us I don't agree with, but we are the government. We are the ones that appoint and should be setting the rules and policies of how this takes place. So if I was to say this, that this is an opportunity and chance for us all to rise up, be better at what we do, work on our own selves for our own getting better, because when we come out of this, it's going to be those kind of changes that it's going to make, save the economy. It's not going to be the government, and they're not going to step up for us. And that's what we should be focusing on, bettering ourselves during this period of time, so that when it is over, we will be able to step up and rise above and get through this time by being better neighbors, better friends, better family to people, better business operators. And if that is non-confrontational and it does not intend to be disagreeing with, but I think that the success will come from our belief in ourselves and our ability to individually rise above and control ourselves and be better. Because the government, no matter what we want and how we want it to be, they have their own interests, and it's not always the people's interests.
Do you mind if I make a shameless plug? I wrote a book. It's available on Amazon.com. It's called Coronavirus, the Activities Guide. You can take a look at it right there. It talks about all of the things that we just discussed right here, Michael. Self-improvement, using this time to better yourself, taking care of some of your personal infrastructure, like reviewing your will or making sure that you do productive time with your children. It's $10.99 paperback. You can look for it by that title or search by my name.
I did, but it was not on Amazon.
It sure is. I'll send you a link. I will send you a link.
They pulled it because it was connected.
Yeah,
they said they were going to, but they didn't. So,
I was searching though. I didn't see it then.
It's
so
right. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going back on to get it. So.
Yeah. So thank you for letting me plug that. I love it.
It's
only available
45.
Rick.
I beg your pardon?
It's only available on the dark web.
No, it's available on Amazon. Amazon Kindle. You can get it for a Kindle book, or you can order a paperback.
It should make you want to read it more because it was a banned book.
I know.
I love that. Author of a banned book, Rick Thompson. Yeah.
Subversive.
Another attribute to add to the tagline on my email.
Pull me out of my reading slump I'm in right now. I'm stuck on a book right now. I can't get going. Would it pull me out of that reading slump?
It'll give you lots of other activities that you can do in order to inspire you, which then you can use to pull yourself out. You can start yoga. There's different classes you can take via video, self-improvement ways you can do, even when you're by yourself. And of course, some of the things will apply to people who have free access and just maybe are idle through their work location. Some people who are quarantined, other people that are isolated all by themselves. So,
excellent. Good for you, Rick.
I'm going to post this in the comments on our broadcast. How's that?
That'd be awesome.
All right.
Any final thoughts, Michael?
Well, I just want to repeat that the opinions and comments expressed on tonight's show by the hosts, guests, and commentators may not represent the actual opinions or thoughts of Komorn Law. It may have just been offered to entertain the podcast community that we love so much and appreciate you joining us tonight. So that's that. Thanks for being here, everybody. I don't have any other final thoughts other than I'm upset we didn't get to the monster. I think that would have been a better topic than this.
Well, we can reschedule that for next show to put a little
next week
and include Steve's movie reviews on Nicky Cage and others.
Yeah.
All right.
And the Parasite movie recommended.
Yeah, the Parasite movie, C Murder.
Alan, a.k.a. C Murder.
Yep. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Good show.
Michael.
John, take care up there.
Good to see everyone.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
John, good to see you, Amanda.
Good talking.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Good guys.
Good night.
All right, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Rick.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
See you guys.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today, michiganmedicalmarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. michiganmedicalmarijuana.org.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are tuning into Kicking It with Komorn, where we take a new topic every month based upon what you want to learn about legality and cannabis in Michigan.
It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. Set him free, let him be, breathing air like you and me. What's the judge to do? What else can Judge Columba do? We got to set him free. This whole place went nuts. If he was a soldier man, shooting gooks in Vietnam. If he was CIA, selling dope and making hay, he'd be free, breathing air like you and me. What's the judge do? What else could Judge Columba do? Well, we got to set him free. And sure enough, that was Saturday, and then next Monday, John Sinclair walked out of jail. And the Supreme Court issued an opinion in People versus John Sinclair that said, it's cruel, it's unusual, it's arbitrary, it's irrational, it's capricious, and it cannot be the law in the state of Michigan that we treat marijuana the same way we treat opioids. And they set him free.
These events inspired the creation of Ann Arbor's annual pro-legalization Hash Bash Rally, which and it's going to be held this April in Ann Arbor, and I have been asked to be one of the main speakers at the event. Again,
John Sinclair was and is a poet provocateur, and adamant opponent and protester against America's involvement in the Vietnam War and all the bombings. He was organized together with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and the Black Panthers guys. And, you know, he organized against the war. And in his words, you know, we were protesting the war and we were advocating for the legalization of marijuana, all the while smoking vast quantities of it. We ought to do something about finally getting this plant off of the controlled substances list. We have law where the state of Michigan is licensing the medical use of marijuana. At the same time, it says under the Board of Pharmacy says under the Controlled Substances Act that it is still a controlled substance. And not only is it still a controlled substance, it's still a Schedule I controlled substance. And being Schedule I controlled substance means that it is contraband per se, and that its mere presence is evidence of a crime, and it justifies the raids. Michigan State Police spend 40% of their resources going after marijuana that is allowed for medical use, is licensed by the state, is now been voted into law by the people of this state to be legal for adult use. And yet it's still 40% of the police budget, still 40% of the prosecutor's daily load, it's still 40% of the Michigan State Police Crime Lab daily load. And it's still Schedule I, which justifies the stops, the searches, the seizures, and more importantly, the raids. And that means men with AR-15s and ski masks going in where men, women, and children and dogs and grandparents, you know, are quietly sitting there watching TV. And because the neighbor complained of the smell of marijuana coming from a basement window, these patients or caregivers who are, and now any citizen in the state is allowed to grow. The continued placement of marijuana on the Michigan State list of controlled substances is just simply absurd.
This lawsuit arose from, well, it has a lot of history. And a few months ago, we were talking about how absurd it is that Michigan both has marijuana as a Schedule I controlled substance, which theoretically has no medical use, and also we're licensing facilities to sell marijuana as medicine. And we all believe that those two cannot stand together, that they are incompatible. And so here we are today.
It's got a medical legal identity with huge bureaucracies of the state supervising and charging a minimum of $66,000 for you to open a dispensary to sell this weed that last year you could have been arrested and sent to prison for by the same people. You know, this whole thing is just totally horseshit, if I could use that.
That's a technical term.
It's hard to even fathom. And you know, for 80 years they've been locking people up and taking their possessions and harassing and terrorizing us as citizens because we like to smoke weed. So I'm proud to be part of this effort. I want to be part of every effort to completely remove the police from our lives as regarding to marijuana. All right. They got nothing at all to do with marijuana.
Well, 2018, when the administrative rules were supposed to be implemented to provide a mechanism for people applying to get licenses, the state at the same time acknowledged the principle that Michigan, to avoid a state of emergency so patients couldn't get their marijuana, needed to formulate emergency rules. So, first of all, when the legislature passed this law, they acknowledged that the state would be in an emergency if people didn't get marijuana. That is not how you talk about a controlled substance. Secondly, the way that they dealt with it was that they allowed caregivers, who they vilified for the last however many years, to supply these places where patients would get cannabis. This is not a controlled substance. This is not how controlled substances are provided for patients. And as the year went on, they tried to move to their regulated system that's been created, which wasn't working. They had more caregivers, extended the roles, and identified the names of caregivers this last go around that this method of people growing in their basement are going to provide, or wherever are going to provide to be the source for patients. And that's the state of affairs right now in Michigan. This is not a controlled substance.
Hi, I'm Steve Miller. I'm a retired sergeant with the Canton Police Department. Had just under 25 years of police work. On behalf of John Sinclair, our law firm, Komorn Law, along with Matt Abel and his law firm at Cannabis Council, are suing the state of Michigan Pharmacy Board to have marijuana removed off the controlled substances schedule. So today I'm here to tell a story. We're going to call it the 7 degrees of separation between Steve Miller and John Sinclair, and linked through one fairly famous politician, Mr. Perry Bullard. 20 plus years ago, when I was a young detective, I investigated a case in which Mr. Bullard suffered a tragic death. He was a great politician to have. I had to investigate that death. Mr. Bullard wrote a Supreme Court opinion that got Mr. John Sinclair out of prison for the 2 joints at that time. Also during this time, when I was a young detective and investigating Mr. Bullard's death, I had the opportunity of meeting one Michael Komorn. We had a case in common, and over the course of that case, he was the defense attorney. We actually did what most think is impossible, and he and I became good friends over the course of that case, and I developed a lot of respect for him at that time. Michael Komorn in and around that same time bringing me to the future where Mr. Sinclair and Mr. Bullard are connected through a Supreme Court opinion written by Mr. Bullard and setting Mr. Sinclair free. Fast forward to now, we have a pretty significant lawsuit against the state of Michigan Pharmacy Board right now. This would be a major thing. If we prevail in this lawsuit and marijuana is removed off the controlled substances schedule, then that will be a major, major thing, and I will feel like I've been a major part of history. Michael Komorn, and through his law firm, has really made significant impacts against the war on drugs, especially as it relates to marijuana, and fighting for what's right in this case and for medical marijuana patients and caregivers all over the state. He is a pioneer in the legal world in marijuana law, and he needs to be commended for all the good work he's done in this area to try and get things right.
Hopefully we'll get our hearing. If not, then we'll fight it out in the Court of Appeals and ultimately back to the Supreme Court that originally spoke in the case of John Sinclair back in 1971. It's time for, this absurdity that has forever lived at the heart of the drug war to be done with. And the way to do that is to take marijuana off the controlled substances list altogether. It's no longer to be policed. It's to be regulated.
Komorn Law, Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law to provide clients with results. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.
And now I'm back on it. What's this? In the face of injustice, we stand proud and tall. Police misconduct drives us up the wall. We come in all shapes and sizes, fighting to be free. Jack-booted thuggery serves to charge our battery. We are the dildos for justice, and we are here for you. When you just don't have the juice to do what you must do, and when the police come calling cause you smoked a little grass, grab a dildo for justice and shove us up their ass. We do all the hard work at attention all the time. We may be rigid, but our justice is sublime. We vibrate with intensity, electric in our cause. When the cops don't have a warrant and they violate our laws, we are the dildos for justice, and we are here for you. When you just don't have the juice to do what you must do, and when the police come calling cause you smoked a little grass, grab a dildo for justice and shove us up their ass.
Nice.
Hi, I'm attorney Michael Komorn of Komorn Law PLC, and you are watching Planet Green Trees.